This meeting is being live streamed.
Okay.
I have no idea why clearing everything does it, but that also happens on Facebook. Sometimes it just doesn't work, but you just clear everything in the browser and then it works.
Okay.
Live streamed.
Okay. So I will stop.
I have no idea why clearing everything does it, but that also happens on Facebook. Sometimes it just doesn't work, but you just clear everything in the browser and then it works.
Okay.
We might want to mute that or something. We might want to mute that or something.
Oh, I'm about to close it. How do you tell him not to make noise? Oh, I'm about to close it.
All right, this is all really distracting. You get the whole mirrors with our own voices here. It's kind of distracting.
That's it. You mute.
Okay, great. We are up on the live stream. Awesome.
Yeah.
I want to test out my live stream because I was joining from the iPad and I just want to see if I can do what I want to do from here or if I need to switch to a computer.
Okay.
So you might need to give me permission, but let's see.
What kind of permission? Well, anybody can host on my whatever it's called. Not host,
right.
Share.
Okay. Well, are you seeing my screen?
Not yet. Wait, it takes a few seconds. Yes, we are.
Okay, great. I'm going to try switching apps and then seeing if this works. So now it's like my task list. But we should be seeing now, I've got my 2 slides. Do we see my slide?
Yeah.
Okay, and then if I switch over to Discord, we should see Discord.
Yeah, IT infrastructure. Oh, what a nice map.
So it's a little bit of a delay there. It's because I'm on Discord now.
Now we see Discord, yes.
Now we see Discord. Okay, and then I'm going to switch over, and if I go, now I'm switched over to a web browser with the GitHub Yak Collective. Do you see that?
Just a second, it's taking a time. Now you're pinned public repository. So I'm seeing GitHub, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's really annoying that it's so laggy.
No,
okay.
It's not laggy. It's laggy because we're looking on YouTube.
Oh, you're watching it on YouTube?
Yeah, I have it open.
Okay. I want to see if it's like not laggy in like Zoom.
In Zoom, it's much less laggy.
Uh-oh, live broadcast to Zoom is stopped because you've stopped screen sharing. Did I just kill it?
I see you stopped screen sharing. Oh, you mean the Zoom stream? No, it's still working.
Okay, good. Because I got a notification that popped up on mine that said the live stream has stopped because you stopped screen sharing. But if we still see
no, he means live streaming from your computer has stopped. Because usually when you have an app, he says screen sharing has stopped.
Okay. Okay, good. So that's a little bit laggy, but then it means it's in sync with my voice. So, all right, great. I can do my thing. I don't think we need to do anything else here. Woo. Okay. I'm going to apologize in advance. I've not done nearly as much practice on mine as I wanted to, partly because I decided last night that I was unhappy with my presentation. I rewrote it.
Oh.
So,
hey, let me teach you a secret. If you write it in the 10 minutes before, you don't have time to rewrite it. Because we all know that if you don't have time to do it right the first time, how will you have time to redo it? So it's the other way around. If you make sure you don't have time to redo it, it is right the first time.
Well, I've had time to run through it once. I was 45 seconds over, which is not bad for a first cut, but that means for some reason, I always take longer
No,
the actual presentation than the practice. So I'm going to
okay.
try to keep it in time.
First of all, I'm seeing you in stereo, but just so you know, on Sunday, we had 5 hours schedule and we definitely finished 2 hours. And they took 5 hours. And it definitely made Venkatesh feel more like phoning these things in. So,
well, let's try to make this a little bit tighter of a show than the last one.
okay.
Nobody wants a 5-hour Zoom meeting.
Okay, so just so you know, one of the things that we're trying to do is, just a second, I don't know where I am. Okay. In Zoom, I will share screen. This one. Okay. So you notice I have Figma.
Oh yeah, I meant to try to drop the infrastructure map into Figma, and I just did not get around to it this morning.
Okay, so Jenna's governance thing is in the picture. I don't know if that's good or bad. And I also don't know how to make this funny thing go away on the bottom.
I'm going to hand that over to Jenna because.
No, I'm telling Jenna. I said Jenna. I mean.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'll just mute and pretend nobody's talking to me.
Jenna answered
me.
Oh,
Jenna, you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but when she answers me on the chat, she'll be looking at the Discord chat, the Zoom chat, the Figma chat, or maybe the YouTube live chat. So, what does this do? So this is, we're using it a bit like Prezi, I guess. You're familiar with Prezi? Yeah, doesn't matter. Oh, Benny Sachin. Benny, can you join the Zoom meeting so I can make you a host? Wait, you can't hear me.
We're definitely in the muddling quadrant of online governance, aren't we? So I love all the pictures of yaks you find there.
Oh, I didn't find these pictures. No. Jenna prepared this page.
Oh, Jenna found it. Okay, Jenna, you have a really good choice of yak pictures.
And I was just looking for the way to arrange my information. And she said, oh, we'll do Figma. I said, Miro. And she said, here it is. So, and she also pre-filled in a lot of it.
Test. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
You are.
I had thought about doing it, but I wouldn't have. But then Rafa popped up yesterday with it as a suggestion. And I like copying people who are smarter than me. It's kind of my thing. And they have, Nathan, they have Unsplash built right in. So I popped open a widget, put in the word yak, and it showed me something like 776 pictures of yaks to select from. So I grabbed some beautiful ones to, and I gave, because it's kind of a map, it gave it edges, because otherwise I think it is kind of disorienting. And Nathan, also, maybe I do think hiding that toolbar at the bottom would be cool. Who's screen sharing now? Is that you, Mayor?
Yes, it is.
I would at least turn off that bottom row that will clean up your screen. The
Oh, you mean
bottom
this
right
one?
X, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to be more, world friendly, I would pull that tab out into its own window and cover up all your 82 other tabs.
Well, you can also do if I think F11 will take that full screen.
Yeah, but Jenna, just so you know, these are the small subset of tabs that have to do with the Yak Rover project.
So
This
you've
is
already thought
all,
about, you're okay with anything that's up there?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. I find that people aren't, haven't thought about it, so forgive
No,
me
no,
for.
you're right. You're right to call my attention to it. But
You could also introduce the RP extension. That's worth 8 seconds.
well, that's under Nathan's.
Oh,
I,
interesting.
I mean, I'm not giving an exhaustive infrastructure tour. Originally I was going to spend most of my time walking through the infrastructure map, but I decided that looking at zoomed in pieces of the map and having me talk really fast was probably not the best strategy. So instead, I'm just briefly talking about the map, and then I'm just going to talk about selected GitHub repos because I think
Uh,
that's the most obvious entry point for people.
I would like to suggest something. We had Mr. Lewis, I forget the rest of his name, saying, I don't see that you have tools for just yakking around. And part of the answer is what we have in the infrastructure map, which is both the selection of the stack and how we use it, and how everything is connected together. So it's not just look what we did, but this was a good question that he asked. He said, "Oh, well, I'm sure you have tools, but I don't see anything." So the overview has to do with look at all these cool tools and how they
Yeah,
help yaks yak.
I mean, the problem is that there are sort of so many different parts of things that you kind of have to pick and choose a little bit. Like we could do an entire presentation just
Yeah,
on our
yeah.
tools.
Oh, I agree. I'm talking about the top view. When you give the top view, you explain the logic, not talk about the individual tools. So
So you think it would actually be more helpful for me to go through the infrastructure map?
no, to explain why we have an infrastructure map. That's what I'm thinking. And point at one or two specific parts of it which are cool, nice, useful, in the daily work. Because like you said, looking at zoomed in parts of the infrastructure map might not be interesting, but understanding how the infrastructure map allows this DAO to operate, not yet DAO, but some DO to operate,
Okay.
and the particular tools that you like, whichever ones they are, and those you would talk, I think that is interesting to somebody who doesn't know anything and wants to know. Jenna, you know what we're missing here is you remember the slides that Venkatesh showed on Sunday of technical, I don't know what to call it.
While you're thinking, I have a quick question for Nathan. Nathan, can you
Mm-hmm.
drop your any imagery that you've got going on or share? I'd like to make an island on the Figma board, and you don't have to use it, but it would be there for people to kind of remember. It could be a marker for what was talked about today.
I've never used Figma,
You don't need to
so
do it. That's what I'm saying. Just show me where your stuff is parked. Is it in the Roam? Is it local
You just
files? Is there
drag
a,
it. Nathan, you just drag it and it appears.
it is kind of magical. And
um,
Mayor, I know about Prezi too. I think Figma's winning the battle of like ease of use and stuff. Do you want to
So
re-click on the widget thing too, Mayor, so that it pops down? I think you're sharing.
so
Yeah, just
Jenna,
click away.
the only image that I had was the infrastructure map. I had
Yeah, where is
like I
that
said, I
now?
had
I'd
the
grab a picture.
I just go to GitHub infrastructure map and it's the infrastructure.svg
Great. Okay,
file.
thank you. Yeah, I don't need to bother you any further than that. I just wanted to
Oh,
check. I'm happy to help.
mhm.
All right, 5 minutes to live.
Sachin, are you here listening? I think you are.
Yeah. Hey, good morning.
Can you, oh, nice to see you. Can you add to your quick notes when you tell about the Figma board? Just tell people that if you click on an icon in the upper right corner, like we were talking about on the Discord,
Yeah, I'll do that.
that it's cool. So somebody could just follow Mayor around, for example, instead of watching the Zoom. But it's
Yeah.
important that people know they too could be followed, and that we've tried to lock down things.
Or
But if you accidentally move something, don't worry about it.
Yeah, cool.
Thank you.
Hmm. We're still missing Venkat, and we should at least wait till all the presenters are here.
He's probably still getting up. This is brutal time zone for him.
I wish I was still getting up. I'm only an hour ahead of Venkat.
Nathan, I'm feeling stupid because we just looked at this. I'm on the infrastructure map page, but where do I see the actual picture? Oh, do I click on the SVG file? Just open that up. Was that it?
Yeah. So if you are,
I'm done. Yep, got it.
okay,
Thanks. I knew I was being stupid.
where will people have a live discussion?
We never decided.
Well,
Let's
you
make
need
a
to
quick
tell me because
decision.
I want to put it on.
I mean, I'd be inclined to say Discord, but not everybody might be a member of the
Yeah.
Discord since it's public. So
Yeah.
probably, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I would say the Discord.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I would say let's see how many people join, and based on the number of attendees, we may not do intros, and the intros can be on Discord, and the discussion can also be
But
there.
which channel? What are we gonna call? General discussion?
I can drop a
Uh,
separate invite link in the chat too for anyone who doesn't happen to be on it already.
It's a good idea. It's, get a, where is some of our join links?
I think channel can be voice, meta, or introductions. That's fine.
Well, we also have the thread that we've been talking about the annual meeting on. That's been more shop, but
I wouldn't use
Let's
the thread
put it
just
on
because
voice
of that
mode.
darn unfurl problem. It feels to
Okay.
me like the voice chat, it would establish the right pattern. That's the one we use for live calls on the server.
Okay. Does somebody want to create an invite for the voice channel then?
I can do that.
Okay, Jenna, is there any way to make letters bigger in Figma?
Any way to make what?
The letters bigger. I just
Zooming.
posted over the housekeeping rules.
Yeah, click on it. Let me watch. Let me see if it's as easy as I think. Click on it.
I just
See
did.
where it says normal? Grab the pull down. You can just try, yeah, and make the box a different shape. So it's pretty rigid about using the style sheets. So pick subheading, try subheading. Yeah, exactly. And make the box wider to fix the, if you click away and then, yeah, now you can reshape the box itself.
Hello,
So
all
obviously line break
joiners.
support.
Hello, all joiners. We're just finishing up a couple of things and waiting for a couple, one more presenter before we get going. So hold on tight.
Are you guys good if we drop the link in? People can join without having gone through the join page on the website. For today, that's fine, right?
Yeah, I think I'm fine with that.
Everybody agree? Okay.
So I'll just note that anybody who is joining with the link we're about to drop in, please also just go through the join page on the website later. That just gets some information into the system, and also will suggest a username. And if you get involved with any projects, it becomes sort of a repository that we can pull some information out of to properly credit you. All right.
Right. And then, so then maybe the only thing that's outstanding is being able to do.
All right. Looks like we've got a full house here. Sachin, I'm going to stop pretending I'm managing things because it's you're actually emceeing. So.
Yeah, there's still a question mark next to my name, so it's fine. So yeah, I think we can start. I think everybody who's doing a talk today is here. So yeah,
Benny, two comments. One, tell me when you want me to start the recording.
Okay.
And two, you can open Figma on your screen, not use mine, and then you have control.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, I'll start sharing my screen and then you can start the recording.
Ooh, it's locked. Okay.
Oh, this is weird. All right, yeah, Mary, you can start recording.
Just a second. Recording.
Yeah, hey everyone, welcome to the Collective annual meeting. So this is the agenda we have for today. And so we'll be going through, giving some context on the things that we have done in the last 2 years, sort of going through some of the projects that we have completed and some of the projects that are currently, that we are currently working on, and also another project, the online governance paper that we are sort of publishing today in a draft form. So I guess to sort of set some context, this is our second annual meeting. And so the first one was December, around the same time last year. And I think, and we started, Yak Collective started around March 2020. And at that time, when we started off, it started off more as like a bunch of indie consultants coming together to collaborate on projects and sort of projects that were sort of to serve as an alternative to like existing big consulting firms. And I think this is sort of reflected in a lot of the projects that we did early on. The first one was the post-COVID reboot. Let me 1 second, try to get this away. So yeah, you can see our projects on the website, yakcollective.org. So some of the initial projects that we worked on were the Don't Waste a Reboot and New Old Home, both of which were sort of content heavy and sort of report heavy projects that normally you would see something like a big consulting firm put out, but with a different perspective from indie consultants. And I think over the last 2 years, we have sort of evolved into a space where people can come together and collaborate on long-term projects that they are working at on a slow pace. So, for example, I think the biggest example is the Yak Rover project that Venkat will talk about later, where everybody who's involved in the project is building a Mars rover with the hope that sometime in the next 10 years, those rovers will get to Mars. And so it's a long, ambitious goal, and everybody who spends time on it sort of spends time on it consistently every week, and makes sort of like slow, steady progress. And I think that's sort of like that's what the energy of the Yak Collective is right now. It's sort of this slow, steady energy. Everybody who is a contributor has been a major contributor, more than making sort of big contributions. It's more like steadily showing up every week, or steadily showing up when there's a need. And that's how we have sort of kept things going. And so, yeah, and I think if any of you have not joined the Discord, I think going through this about page gives a good idea of what we are doing and what to expect. And so if you're new, I would suggest sort of joining the Discord, spending some time in the different projects, the Yak Rover channel. We have the online governance studies chat every Friday. And so I think after you spend about a couple of weeks, you'll get a sense of what are the things that are going on and what are projects that you'd be interested in or that you can start up. So yeah, so with that, I think we'll do a small round of intro for sort of all the main contributors who are here. I'll just go down my screen. If I miss anybody, let me know. And also, I think Jenna dropped the link for the Discord. So everybody on the call, please feel free to introduce yourself in the Discord. Yeah. So Amer, do you want to give a small, short intro?
Sure. My name is Meir Fenster. I've been in the Yak Collective since a few months after COVID started. I've been involved in infrastructure and in the Yak Collective, in the Yak Rover project, which I will talk about later. And in my day job, I'm a patent attorney and I specialize in medical devices. That's it.
Thanks, Meir. Nathan?
I'm Nathan X. I have also been with the Yak Collective almost since the beginning. Originally kind of a lurker, but then wound up having an idea about how we could implement something on the website that people wanted, and now, one thing led to another, and I basically maintain a lot of the website now. Mostly involved in website and other infrastructure things. Recently got involved in a new study group around some blockchain things, just trying to get our heads around that. Day job, I'm not an MBA. I actually work for a large federation of US nonprofits right now, doing IT and security work for them, so internally.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. I forgot to mention something. So Jenna has dropped a link to a Figma board in the chat, so you can sort of go to the Figma board and yeah, 1 second. You can sort of see what we have put together there. So it's mostly some of the projects we have worked on and a few screenshots from the online governance paper and things like that. So yeah. Anuraj, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Anuraj, and I'm based in Finland. I've been with the Yak Collective, I think, since June 2020. Initially, mostly as a lurker until the Yak Rover project started. So I'm mostly involved with the Yak Rover project, and then I try to watch and learn from Nathan as he's maintaining the infrastructures. And yeah, it's fun to be here.
Thanks, Anuraj. Brian, I saw that you joined. Do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. Brian King, have been hanging around Yak Collective since the last one of these yearly town hall meetings, primarily on the weekly online governance chat, and contributed a section to our paper, and hang around quite a bit in the fitness channel, talking about our fitness goals.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I think Jenna asked to be skipped for now. Venkat? Yeah, I don't think
Hey
we need
guys,
an intro, but yeah.
I'm Venkat, and yeah, I've been with the Yak Collective since the beginning as one of the founding members. And I think I'm sort of a generalist. I kind of hop around various activities trying to contribute where I can. And since I have a pretty well-known blog and a fair amount of Twitter reach, usually any promotional or sort of PR type activities tend to fall on me. So that's where I tend to try and contribute. And also the Yak Rover project has been the big focus for me in the last year. And for 2022, that'll continue. And I hope to also do a lot more with the blockchain project. So that's me.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, I think we can go into the talks. And that was most of the main contributors, I think, who's on the call. And I think so Nathan, do you want to talk about infrastructure?
Sure. I'll
stop my screen share.
Yes. All right, and I am going to start my screen share here. So hopefully you can all see my screen there. Just want to give a quick overview of our IT infrastructure. Before I jump in, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what we could think of as the goals of IT infrastructure. So the idea is that it's not really like we don't want to be like infrastructure for its own sake. What we want to be doing is we want to be enabling conversations, enabling collaborations, enabling the production process as we're doing projects like the Yak Rover, the online governance paper. So that's kind of the primary goal. And then the secondary goal is to help explore some of the technology spaces that the Yak Collective is exploring. So that comes out in some of the work around the Yak rovers. That's going to come out, I think, very much more strongly over the next year as we dip our toe into blockchain and try to get a sense of what that's like. So I want to start out by giving an overview of our IT infrastructure. So this is a map that I put together for the last meeting and then updated for this one, trying to give a sense of all the different parts of what we do. And your initial response might be, this is way too complicated, but I also I think this is like trying to be an honest infrastructure map. A lot of people would put like a lot of what's in this box and they just say, oh, this is website front end or something. And this is trying to actually delve into know what are all of the different things that go into this. So I'm not actually going to talk about all of this. I want to just give an overview of what the different parts are and what they do for us. And then I want to delve into some repos on GitHub, because that's where probably I'd say 80% of the infrastructure action happens is there. And I think we can highlight some key areas. So some important clusters here, sort of in the upper left. We've got the website itself, which is hosted in Netlify. We've got DNS, we've got a member system in Knack. We use Cloudinary for some image processing these days. We also host some of our projects in Google. So those first two decks that Sachin mentioned are in Google. Our calendars are in Google here. We're also having a foray out into Mirror, which I think Venkat might or Sachin will talk a little bit about later on, that we're going to link the website to. We have some automation, mostly dealing with member RSS feeds that's happening on IFT right now. GitHub down here doesn't look like that big a spot, but like all of our code repos or public repos in GitHub. Also, our Roam instance, which Roam is kind of our wiki and planning and just brain dump, that all gets backed up to GitHub. All the action, of course, happens down in Discord, and there's a lot of stuff happening with Discord because we have a lot of bots. We've got Carl, Unbelievable, Bookmarker. Those are sort of standard bots that we have out there. We also have a lot of bots that we've developed ourselves that are hosted on a server in Vulture. And then, of course, we now have the foray into the Yak rovers, which has already been mentioned. Mayor's going to be talking about that a little bit more later. That connects both the Discord and some of the services in Vulture, and kind of is now a physical presence of the Yak Collective's IT infrastructure. But what I want to do here is I want to focus on GitHub. So I'm going to just switch over here to our GitHub page and just talk about some key repos here. So this is not going to be an exhaustive tour, but I want to give a sense of like what's happening in each of these repos and where we could use some help, like where if you're interested in contributing, you could dig in and start making your mark here. So one thing I'll just note right away that is if you're a documentation person, we can always use more help with documentation. It's probably our weakest part when it comes to IT infrastructure. So any of these repos, if you want to take a crack at some of that, that would be a helpful thing. So the first repo I want to just talk about briefly, because I've already shown it to you, is the infrastructure map, which is the infrastructure map that I just showed. This thing right here is generated from this repo here. All that is a doc file, so GraphViz. There's a corresponding IT infrastructure page in Roam. So that has all of this information. We embed the SVG, and then a lot of pages that talk more about the various services there. Some places we could definitely use some help. The infrastructure map is a little bit messy. I don't think any of us are GraphViz experts. So if you know more about GraphViz, cleaning that doc file up would be really great. Or maybe moving this over to something like Mermaid that could be more easily embedded in Markdown files. There's also a question of how to keep this up to date. At the moment, I kind of just take a crack at it once a year. But it would be great if we could keep this up to date in a more continuous fashion. The next repo to talk about is our backup repo. Just talk about that very briefly. Roam is backed up to this nightly using a project called Roam to GitHub, which is not something we maintain, but is very, very useful. We dump all the backup formats for Roam, so EDN, JSON, Markdown into here, just so if something happens, we have that information. Some places that we could use some help here, is there a better way to back up Roam than the Roam to GitHub project? In particular, is there a better way to export Markdown from Roam? Because we'd like to be able to use that Markdown more easily in other pages. And also just what else could we be backing up here? There's a lot. Google doesn't really fit into GitHub, but there's a lot of other things that we might want to back up. Next repo is the one that's just called Yak Collective. That's the very first repo we had, and that's the website. And I spend most of my time in here. So this is just a Jekyll website. If you're familiar with Jekyll, you'll notice some Jekyllisms here, config, gem files. It's built in Netlify. It does use a custom build process that lives here in bin build. Right now, we're just doing some more intense minification than Netlify does on its own, but that's going to become, that custom process, I think, is going to become much more important as the year goes on. We start playing around with some decentralized hosting solutions. The biggest deviation from Jekyll is we do have a Netlify function here in functions, that's create posts. That we have RSS feeds that get processed by if, they get then pushed to this functional endpoint. And all this does is make a commit back into this repo. And that's how we keep the writings page and the newsletters page up to date on the website. So some future directions here. Definitely need to simplify this. There's kind of too many custom widgets, too much custom front matter that's going on right now. So we want something that's easier to maintain, but easier for non-technical people to deal with. We're also, again, in our blockchain explorations, looking at moving this to more of a decentralized infrastructure, maybe IPFS, maybe something different. So that's a big project over the next year. In general, we could use help. I think the site probably needs an accessibility audit. It needs some design work. I'm not a designer. It definitely has some rough edges with design. It can use some tighter CSS. So if you're like a designer CSS person, that would be a great place. We could use a lot of help there. Also, how to better integrate the website with Discord, probably through Knack, maybe get some integrations with Roam. These are things we want to do, but there's still some open questions about what's the best way to do that. So that's website in a nutshell. Move on now to Discord bots, which is most of the repos that we have. So the first one to talk about really briefly is the Project UE bot. I actually should mention that these Discord bots, again, mostly run on Vultr, and really Mayor wrote, Mayor did an incredible job putting these together and is the main contributor here. So I really credit where credit is due. Project UE, though, oops, switched the wrong one. That maintains the project notifications channel on Discord. So this channel right here. What happens is they auto creates a role for every channel and incubator projects, site groups, work groups here, and then lets you subscribe or unsubscribe, add yourself to that role so you can get project specific notifications. We could definitely use maybe a little bit better of an interface here, a little bit better of a way for people to track what roles they're part of, maybe a better heads up display for the channels. So if you're interested in bots, that's a good place to start. Another bot that we use a lot is the Giga Yak Bot. This maintains our various lists, so gig lists, agendas, reading lists. These are all maintained because in the by one bot, because in the back end, they're very structurally similar. We could always use some help cleaning up or improving or extending those commands related to those types of lists there. It also would be great to integrate with Discord /commands. That'll probably require rewriting some of the bots because the library we're using doesn't support those. But if you are a Discord develop bot person, if you know some Python, or if you want to re-implement this in a different language, that would be a great project to work on as well. I know I'm going a little bit over time here. I'm going to try to get through this a little bit faster. So last bot I really want to focus on is the onboarding robot. We also sometimes call this Yak Scraper or the Shepherd. This is kind of our Carl equivalent. We use Carl as well, but this is sort of creates a lot of different commands and manages a lot of different commands that we use. So bot help files live here for the various other bots. The unfurl command, which you'll see used quite frequently on the Discord, which lets us pull content from one channel into another, is run by this bot. It also maintains the events this week channel. So this channel up here is set up, which shows us what's coming up here. And then various admin and newsletter related commands are handled by the onboarding robot. So some places that we could use some help here, definitely some better help files. We could use some polish on the events of the week. And then of course, more commands. We don't want to duplicate Carl or Unbelievable, but we want to really have as rich and featureful of commands and just, again, what are the needs of the Yak Collective, and let's get those implemented. Just really briefly here, just to finish up, we have some new bots that are tied to the Yak rovers. The IMZ1 that lets Discord talk to rovers, and then Rover Twitter, which lets the rovers talk to Twitter. Mayor's going to be talking a lot more about the various rover projects later, so I'm not gonna steal any thunder there. So those are kind of the main different types of bots we have. I want to kind of end with a call to action here. If you have an idea about how to contribute things, feel free to spin up your own repo or fork a repo. Make a pull request. That's how I got started. Venkat was musing, I wonder if the website could do this. And I thought about it. I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure we can do that. And I spun up a demo, and that's how I got involved. We also have 2 weekly meetings around infrastructure on Wednesdays, 9 a.m. Mountain Time, U.S. Mountain Time. We have a meeting that tends to be more focused on big picture questions, priorities, decisions. I'm on that meeting pretty much every week, but I won't be on this week because I have another commitment, but I'm every other week. We also have a Saturdays work block, again, starts at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. U.S. Mountain Time. That's more of a working meeting. We actually try to get something done in each of those and just try to dig in a little bit. So that is IT infrastructure in a nutshell, big picture and some of that small picture, and some places where, if you are interested in contributing, join a meeting, make a pull request. We try to be friendly around here. So that's me.
Quickly, can you quickly speak to the broader philosophy of automation? You shared a lot of details, but a quick comment on sort of the philosophy of automation versus human action in our infrastructure might be, I think, helpful context.
Yeah, so I mentioned it very briefly at the beginning, but it's I think a lot of what we're trying to do is we're trying to find what are the rough edges, and then also what are the cow paths on Discord, yak paths as they might be, and paving those. So it's like unfurl came from we're always referencing, somebody said something on some other channel, and originally we were copying it over, and then Mayor wrote this wonderful command that lets us easily take a link and put it into another channel. So it's looking at like, what are the things that people are spending time on that can, is a very typical thing. This job could be replaced by a small shell script. Well, if you're seeing this, you're seeing like people are doing this thing and you're like, this is a small shell script. Well, that's a perfect infrastructure project to take a crack at. I think that kind of, and then of course, again, explorations beyond that. So, people have been doing work around the Yak rovers, and then there's infrastructure that gets built out around that to try to enable that. We're looking at, we're starting to put our toes into blockchain and being able to, actually implement some of those ideas and explore that and see what works and what doesn't. So that's sort of a secondary goal to it as well.
Any other questions?
Mayor, you had your hand up as well. I don't know if that's purposeful.
Yeah, I would just wanted to emphasize what you said. In moving towards being more blockchain DAO oriented, Discord is very convenient with its bot infrastructure. And we already have some bots like Shepherd that apply policies. And it's a baby step. It's nowhere near what you need for DAO, but it's part of the infrastructure for building a DAO. I just thought I'd mention that.
Okay. Yeah, if there are no other questions, I think we can move on to the next talk. And thanks, Nathan.
Sachin, I think I do have one for Nathan. Is there an established process for removing infrastructure that isn't used? I guess like being a looser knit community, it's easier to remove stuff than it is to keep it around and maintain it.
I think so. We don't really have a formal process. I am definitely a person who believes in keeping things as tight as possible. So you'll notice there's actually a box in the upper right of unused infrastructure that's kind of fallen out over time. So we used to have infrastructure, for example, in Glitch that got replaced by the Create Posts webhook. By and large, we haven't retired very much infrastructure yet. I think that's mostly been, the people who maintain it, looking at it and just trying to keep a critical eye on things. I think there's also a certain amount of being a volunteer organization. Like what we keep active is what we can maintain and what there is interest in. So, as things fall out, like people who are maintaining Discord periodically go through, and like if bots aren't being used, we kill some of those integrations. We do reach out and talk to people beforehand, but at the moment it's a small enough team that we can talk about these things informally and make these decisions generally like on the Wednesday or Saturday calls. I saw another question pop in the chat, so I'll just answer that about infrastructure development funded. Yeah, Venkat, all volunteer right now. Okay.
Any other questions for Nathan? All right. Thanks, Nathan. So yeah, I think next up, Jenna, do you want to talk about publishing ops?
Sure, thanks, Sachin. I'm another hanger out. I've been around for about a year and a half. So what I'm going to talk about is this kind of the same thing as my intro, that I've been in indie for over 30 years, so there's some kind of cred for just surviving. And for many of those years, I was doing book work. So how do you take a book from manuscript through to print? And about 10 years ago, the book industry got clobbered, 2008, blah, blah, blah. And I got very webby about that time. So it's been fun to see how what we did in the book industry could be transferred over. And so I think these are two mermaid diagrams from our Rome, showing like the traditional, these are the steps. And I actually think they're pretty true for anything that you would want to publish on the web, where you wanted to have a sense of quality instead of, quick and dirty. So, there's nothing wrong with quick and dirty. It's just nice to know how, that there's a choice there. Let's see. So in terms of the Rome, the links to these things are here. And I will also give a shout out to Mayor. He made a Chrome plugin that turns this nasty ass anonymous Rome link into a proper thing with a name via tiny URL. So that's kind of fun. And that's a model for what we've done. I'm not a coder, but I can understand and kind of hang with it a little bit. And so to say, I bet that's something, just what Nathan had said, I bet that's something we could make better. And suddenly somebody did. So that was fun. And let's see, on the Roam, we have a sampler for cool web stuff that has been getting published. The web took what we were doing with traditional books and sort of blew up this phase itself, the design. All kinds of things can happen that didn't used to be true. We have a channel on to talk about this kind of stuff on the Discord. And for the moment, I have a thread there that I'm the only one that's posted anything, but we're specifically tracking publications that have been coming onto Mirror. So folks are welcome to go dive in there. And then, so that's for projects internally to the Yak Collective where there might be some sort of publishing output. And I don't want to jump the gun, but we're going to pass that off for the Mirror doc that we're about to publish. The other thing that interests me a lot, and it's kind of a model for how you might think about joining in if you wanted to play in this space, that because of hanging around here, for example, earlier this week on Sunday, in fact, I learned how to live tweet. Today I'm learning how to use Figma. I've never used it before. I am a little bit, but in any case, to see that it's actually really easy and kind of fun and good for meetings like this. So that was thanks to Rafa, who's from Mirror on that and also on our server. And then I'm tracking how all of these, the DAOs are really big right now, of course, but it's not new for humans to try to figure out how to work together. What's new is to be able to combine the sync-async intergalactic communications. And nobody knows how to do it yet, so I just want to run through a couple of examples that have passed my radar. Cabin's a neat DAO because they're working the physical space as well as being a DAO. And they're using, good old Google Docs for a welcome packet for the creators that come and live in their cabins. Similarly, they're using Clarity in conjunction with their Discord server. What's that? Was that a question? So I'll keep going. For when does a Discord conversation get too messy and needs to turn into a communication space of a different sort with more longevity? And then Mirror itself is doing a lot of really interesting things. So one of the projects I took on last summer, I wanted to mention, was diving into our Substack newsletter. And for 6 weeks running, I pretended I was a robot once on the weekend, and I would create a newsletter that looked like stuff that maybe could be automatically scraped. And so that a newsletter could be automatically generated from what we like to call project exhaust. And then that's how the Saturday infra call started, trying Anuraj and Nathan and I looking at specifically how we could build that. So we're still working on that, but not in a intense way, because we don't do anything intensely around here. And I also support these three, the problem of how to deal with the fire hose that can be a Discord server, or on our server, Venkat recently called it a mangrove swamp. You can just swim around and check out things in different corners, and you'll probably never know everything that's going on, and to be okay with that. So these guys, the Mirrorfolk team, is experimenting with 3 different things to try to address that problem. And I really support both their doing that and then the transparency of, so much of this world, people do things out loud and together. This was another post from a Mirror contributor. No, sorry, this is Bankless. She was on the Bankless DAO. Let me zoom out just a little bit. You can dive in and look at this. I just did some screenshots, but these are things we know to be true. Coordination can be hard. Setting up processes and making decisions takes a while, and we need better tools to collaborate. So this is the kind of stuff that interests me for helping the Yak Collective look at how we might do that. And on a 10-year time horizon, right? Like, this stuff is still so new. I also dropped in a link to Levels. The CGM monitor folks are working in public on YouTube. They're sharing amazing stuff live on YouTube, internal company stuff that would usually be internal. And this one in particular is about how they use Threads, which is what they're using instead of Discord, for sync quick conversations, and Notion, which they're using instead of our Roam for longer form teamwork. and they're completely remote companies. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, sorry. That was pretty funny. I think I'm almost there. Yeah. See, I set the Figma timer to help deal with presenter derangement. I don't know if Act's here today, but he posted a link like this incredible explosion. Right now, I'm old enough to have seen a few of these things come and go, so super curious to see where it goes over time. And the Yak Collective gives me what really feels like a safe place to play around and look at that kind of stuff. So I think those are my main interests. And yeah, let me turn it into questions. Go ahead, Sachin, if you want to field them, or people can just jump on the call.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions?
And if not, let's hand it off let's go look at who's next.
I think it's me.
Aha, perfect.
Yeah, and I think just to add to what Jenna said, Jenna was also part of the Astonishing Stories project, where we were publishing speculative fiction. And I think that was one of the projects in which we sort of first experimented with having this whole sort of publishing funnel setup. And it's also something we used for the online governance paper. So yeah. Cool. If no other questions, cool. Yeah, so I'll talk a bit about the online governance study group and the online governance paper that we are publishing. So yeah, I think to set some context, I've been with the Yak Collective since the beginning. Have been part of, was part of most of the early projects, and then sort of also started up the Astonishing Stories project, which was basically a collection of speculative fiction published by sort of members of the Yak Collective. And to give some context on the online governance study group, I think it was probably the first sort of weekly chat that Venkat kicked off. And the format of the chat was sort of inspired by the Amazon format of, we'll take 15 minutes to read something, and then we'll discuss that for 30 to 40 minutes. And I don't think we didn't start the chat with the goal of discussing just online governance. Yeah, we didn't start with the goal of just discussing online governance. I think it's sort of the subject of online governance emerged from basically sort of a mix of topics that we were discussing on the call, and also problems that or things that we were trying to solve and figure out within the Yak Collective itself. And that's how we sort of came into basically making it a specific study group about online governance. And I think we kicked off writing this paper about 6 months ago. And most of the writing was done in weekly sprints, where every week we would spend time, about 1 hour on editing and writing the paper. And so I'll drop the link to the draft. So right now we have published it as a draft on Mirror, and we are planning to make some, there are still more edits to be made, and we are planning to publish a better version and this week. I'll also share my screen. Yeah, so I think Yeah, and I think to give some context on Mirror, I think along the lines, at some point within the Discord, we also started exploring and looking more into Web3 technologies and sort of exploring what things we can do. Some of us sort of published NFTs just to see what they look like and what it feels like to sell an NFT. And I think, and we were part of the Mirror Right Race, and that we're part of the Mirror DAO since we won a token in the Right Race. So we are a publication on Mirror. For those who are not familiar with Mirror, it's basically a platform where you can publish basically written content or essays, and you have both the option of just publishing it and also publishing it as an NFT that people can collect. And we felt that what Mirror offered sort of like the medium felt right for how we had worked through it. It was basically a collaborative effort there were, I think, probably over 20 people who dropped in and out of the study groups. And we had, I think, 6 contributors, including editors who sort of spent time on writing different sections of this paper. So I think the medium of Mirror, where like we are also sort of planning to publish this as an NFT, and when that happens, the medium of Mirror where we could split it between everybody who contributed sort of makes sense. And I think just to give a quick overview of the paper, I posted the link, so it's obviously better to read through it, and we'd like to get your feedback on it. Yeah, also, I think since it's in a draft stage, I think maybe don't share it as much on social media or anything of that sort. I think we are still sort of working through a few things on the paper. And yeah, I think to give an overview of the paper, so this is sort of a list of all the things that we read during the study group of over a year, and I think there are close to 50 readings on here, and they sort of cover a wide range of starting from like how open source projects are governed and managed to medieval guilds and yeah, so a sort of inspiration from like principles in architecture, and so it sort of covers a really sort of wide range of ideas when it comes to governance. And I think what we're trying to do with the paper is to sort of basically help people get an overview of what sort of the governance terrain looks like, and what are the sort of common patterns that can be identified, or what are the different traps that organizations can fall into. Yeah, you can also see the list of readings at the very bottom of the paper, so you can click and read through them. Yeah, and I think this 2x2 is sort of basically the main part of the, let me see if I can zoom out. Yeah, this 2x2 is sort of the main focus of the paper. The rest of the paper is sort of about going into each quadrant of the 2x2. So we sort of classified governance regimes in terms of like high alignment, low alignment, and managed wild. So something that is high alignment managed would be like examples like modern tech companies like Netflix seems like a good example of high alignment managed, while a high alignment wild, which we call Gaia, is sort of basically high in alignment, but it's more emergent and sort of in opposition to rules. So I think some of the things that we read there were Ivan Illich is one that I remember pretty clearly. And actually, I think the contributors for 3 of the quadrants are on here. So maybe they can take a minute each to talk about it. Brian, would you be okay talking about
You have
Gaia?
solved the cereal and the milk problem in a very innovative way. But just stop eating when you get to the end of the cereal.
Yeah, I can go ahead, Sachin. So I did the Gaia quadrant, the high alignment and wild. We like it's interesting that sorry, not prepared. I guess I would say that maybe it's helpful to like talk about alignment and wild. Let's try that. So I think we came about this like what's the opposite of managed, and we had this anarchist track of reading, and a lot of like biological things kind of came out of that, of how nature works. The Gaian hypothesis kind of says that everything in nature is always kind of seeking equilibrium and looking for an optimal state. And within that process, you kind of see structure emerge. So that's kind of where the high alignment piece comes in. What kind of structure can groups such as the Yak Collective or other online communities, even like remote distributed organizations, what can we do to kind of put some scaffolding in place so that we can be effective and get the things done that we need to, so that we can kind of remain wild. I liked Jenna's comment along the lines of like, we don't do anything intensely around here. I think that's kind of the MO of the Gaia quadrant. So would be happy to answer any questions, but I can pass on the spotlight to Venkat or Guri to talk about their quadrants.
Venkat or Gregory, are you on? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't think Gregory's on.
Okay.
I can quickly speak. So I'm going to take credit for the 2x2 since that's my thing. So it felt like a good way to organize, as Sachin said, almost 50 readings. I think there were a couple more, but this was a subset we organized. And in the 2x2, I was writing up the muddler quadrant, which is regimes of governance that are like managed but low alignment, as in people are trying to like kind of move towards a common direction at least, and but there's a lot of confusion, uncertainty, and so forth, and people have lots of like misalignments on what they think is going on. So there's low alignment, and how do you manage under such circumstances? And typically you end up with like, a lot of confusion, rework, people talking past each other. And I think that should be familiar to anybody who's worked in an online community. So managed and low alignment, the reason we called it the muddler quadrant is one of the key readings I think all of us liked is this classic paper by Charles Lindblom. I think it's from the 1950s. It's called The Science of Muddling Through, which is how do you actually make progress when there's this kind of like confused, low energy, low alignment thing, but people still want to move forward. And it's a great article on how things actually happen in that regime. And I think this is true of all the quadrants, where even though we read about 50 papers, I think all of us ended up converging around, like, I would say an 80-20 rule kind of emerged, where 20% of the readings ended up carrying like 80% of the sort of load of our strategic thinking. And this was one of them. The Science of Muddling Through is one of the sort of load-bearing pillar readings in our study group. So yeah, I would one of the patterns in this 2x2 is the lower left is kind of the lowest energy quadrant. So when a community has low energy, muddling through is kind of the baseline state. So in a way, you're sort of backstopping rate of progress depends on how much your sort of floor of energy is, and that's how good you are at muddling through. And I think we are actually pretty good at muddling through, where we kind of make very slow inch-along progress, even when things are confused, people are dropping in and out and so forth. And back to you, Sachin.
Cool. Thanks, Venkat. Yeah, I'll do a quick overview of the Probation Quadrant, which I worked on. Yeah, which is wild and low alignment. So I think this is, yeah, I mean, wild and low alignment seems like sort of a recipe for nothing happening, where basically it results in a lot of infighting and general chaos if an organization becomes wild and low alignment. I think my favorite reading from this section was the town that went feral, which is about a New Hampshire town, which with a lot of libertarians, and a lot of the funding for different parts of the town, including the parks, got defunded, and as a result, bears started descending on the town, and some people wanted the bears to be around, and they would like feed the bears. So it basically was sort of like a complete collapse, because sort of, I think the libertarians in the town were not aligned with the rest of the people who are living there, and also not in alignment with nature in general. So I think that's one of my favorite readings there. And another one, which is sort of, I think it was part of both the Muddler Quadrant and the Probation, is Ernst Younger, and sort of like the profile on Ernst Younger. And I think while Younger did not sort of start any organization of any kind, I think he sort of basically had this sort of low alignment perspective on things. And I think one of the things that he talks about and warns about is basically other people. His concept of an anarch is basically, if other people know that your alignment, your low alignment with a specific ideology, then you would probably be scapegoated or targeted. So that was sort of an interesting read as well. Yeah, and I think another, again, I'm just sort of calling out some of the favorite reads that come to mind, was the one on, I think it was called Nakatomi Spaces. And it was basically about this, basically an essay comparing, I think, the Israeli invasion of Palestine in 2002 with Die Hard, and how sort of John McClane moves through the building by sort of destroying internally through the building without using the architecture that is designed to navigate the building, and which is, again, I think something that would happen in a sort of like low alignment wild situation where people are sort of making their own way without sort of basically using resources that have been provided. So yeah, those are a few things that come to mind. So Gregory was the one who worked on the Citadel Quadrant. He's not here, but you can read through the section. And yeah, so we have the online governance studies Discord on the channel on the Discord. Yeah, so if you have any comments on the paper, it's still in draft form, so feel free to share your comments with us on the online governance studies channel. We are still sort of working towards finishing this. And also the governance chat happens every Friday at 11 Central Time. And it usually lasts for about 45 minutes to an hour. And we have, so for the next set of readings, what we have queued is more along the lines of, let me find it. Yeah, we have sort of discussed and figured out a few sort of directions that we want to have more readings in. So one is nature and long-term thinking. The other was sort of case studies on case studies on, like, I think we read a lot about like patterns in online governance, and now we want to sort of do case studies on like how a lot of these patterns actually play out in different organizations. And we are sort of exploring Web3 technologies, like we mentioned. So we have a track of readings on that. So all of this is on this Rome page, which I can post if you want to explore. So yeah, please, if you're interested in sort of exploring these sort of things, join us on Fridays at 11 Central. So yeah, any questions?
I'll throw in a comment. We've gone back and forth about calling it online governance versus general governance. And it's like one of those weird things where if you talk about governance, the topic becomes too broad because it includes everything from running countries to like large corporations. Whereas if you talk about online governance specifically, it seems to be almost too narrow, because there are like offline things that happen, like, meetups, or like, you might even like start a small organization locally. But overall, I think even though we are reading a lot about all sorts of governance issues, we tend to have our focus coming from the problems we are actually facing running our own Yak Collective activities, which are online. So even though we might be reading about like, medieval guilds or something like running a large farmers cooperative in Spain or something like that, the application tends to be in our own context. And that's why I think the term, the art of online governance, is kind of justified. And going forward, I think that'll still be the case. The focus will come from what we're doing, but the net we cast is going to be super broad, and we're basically interested in reading about anything that sheds light on governance, including like biological ecosystems, which we all, I think, like, and we tend to read a lot of things about inspirations from biology, which Brian talked about. I just wanted to throw that in.
Thanks, Venkat. Yeah, any other questions or comments?
Also want to comment or a question. So I haven't had a chance to read the full paper yet, but was part of your research also looking at like how other online communities organize, or was it more focused on like the more abstract kind of frameworks for governance? I guess like, are there some like case studies of like other communities that you looked at that are trying to solve similar problems?
I think one set of readings that we looked at were sort of how open source projects were governed. It's not exactly online communities in the sort of 2021 sense, but it has sort of like a significant history, and a lot of those projects are really big. So we thought that would be a good place to read about it. So I think we covered a lot of sort of concepts about how those projects tend to be governed. I think some of the few that come to mind is there's one called Benevolent Dictator for Life, which was about open source projects with like a benevolent dictator essentially, who sort of makes the yes or no decision on like if something should go to commit or what direction the project should go in. I think Vitalik for Ethereum is an example, I think. And so, but other online communities, I think we recently started reading on, we started reading on Gnosis Guild, but I think it was more things published by Gnosis Guild than something about how those communities are managed. And I think maybe the reason is that current communities are pretty early in their lifetime, while things like open source projects have been around for a long time, and we have more sort of stable patterns to uncover there.
I'll add, not specifically online communities, but there were some case studies we read. GitLab, Valve, the software company. An interesting one was Morningstar, which is a tomato processor. We read kind of some of their handbook kind of things, which I think a lot of that came out of some of the open source software ideas. So some of those case studies are outlined in the paper, and the references are also in there. But to Sachin's point, like I think a lot of the online communities are so new and so chaotic that it's hard to make sense of what's going on in them. But I would be interested to look at, like, you know, kind of like what happened with the Constitution DAO, things of that nature, like are interesting to apply some of the framework we've created to those.
And I have one more other comment to comment on here, which is, it reminds me of how you said that online governance is kind of a special scenario. It's funny because it's like, it's the same thing with how the sooner we stop calling it like e-bucks or e-cash, the sooner we start. So we'll know that online governance is succeeding when we stop calling it online governance and just start calling it governance. But on top of that, it also reminds me of, I'm curious what's kind of the maximum scope we're going here in terms of some rough measure like head count, because I'm reading a book right now, or just opening a book on how Asia works, large kind of macroeconomic kind of comparison. And they even mentioned on that point of, hey, we're comparing a lot of large East Asian and Southeast Asian nations or economies and how they've handled challenges differently, but they excluded Singapore and Hong Kong because they're city states and they have very distinctly different kind of challenges, and that wouldn't necessarily generalize to larger economies. Or at least that was an approach they took in that book or in that analysis. And so I'm curious, as that would apply to us, when we're talking about things like the Yak Collective and things at our scale, what's kind of the maximum scope we're going for here? Is it 150 people? Is it, I'm curious how that we can apply a similar lens like that of trying to be very explicit, or maybe we even shouldn't be, but trying to be, if we were explicit about our scope in terms of, organization size, collective size, what would be the sweet spot for us?
I can take a quick stab at responding to that, if you like, Sachin. So we've had discussions on this through the year, and an interesting challenge that comes up is even like the terms become confusing. So is the Yak Collective one large Discord server with, at present, I would say 600 to 800 people with a certain percentage of activated people, like maybe 10 to 20% are active at any given time. Is that the way to measure the size of the Yak Collective? Or should you think in terms of that's just the name of the overall space, but the unit of activity is really the weekly project meetings or chats. And in that case, the actual unit that matters is like who's on a call or who's on a project, which is actually typically less than 10. So if it's the latter that's the case, then the scaling question is not really a question. You could grow to like, 1 billion people if the unit is actually 7 people having a chat. And really then it becomes a question of, do you automate all the schedule management so people can find the chat they want? So Twitter, I think, is like that. Even though it has like billions of users, really conversation happens around like little conversation groups that intend to interact a lot, right? And the boundaries are not visible. But on the other hand, if there are like collective action or coordination problems you're doing that involve the entire sort of nominally scope thing. So if, for example, like this meeting is one of the larger things we've ever done. And right now, I think there's 38 people online. And I think at one point, the first burst of energy when we did the first town hall very early on, we had like 90 people on a Discord chat at once. So how big you think things are are capable of getting is a function of what you think is actually worth counting as the right number. So to take the sort of most extreme version of your question, I would say, what's the most complex collective action problem we could ever take on, and what would be the group that would come together even briefly for that? So I don't think we've actually spiked beyond like 50 for a couple of hours so far. So I have no sense of where the ceiling is on this thing, because I think one of the challenging things of like digital governance tools is they make so many things weirdly possible that, like, Constitution DAO was an example of like thousands of people coming together to try and buy a constitution, right? So I don't know where the ceiling on this thing is. So weird things could happen. I don't know if that responded to your question, but I would say the field is wide open, basically.
Certainly. It seems like Jordan wanted to hop in.
Yeah, just a little comment along the same lines. I've been less active with the Yak Collective this year, in large part because of real world stuff, but that included a city election and a whole bunch of stuff here in Minneapolis. And you see the exact same governance dynamics. And this is where the online governance is governance, I think, really scales. You have the people that live in a given terrain. You have the people that are eligible to vote. You have the people that are interested in a given topic. What are the hot button issues? And navigating the information spaces of it, a lot of the challenges are the same, which is that you need to find a way to have that light.
Drying your helmets so that you can wear them.
Pardon?
Sorry, I just muted.
One of the biggest value adds is giving a light, loose peripheral awareness to the largest group of people, so they have a sense of, when I care about that one thing, I can jump in and be like, hey, I want to contribute, or hey, that's a great idea. Most of the issues is that the people, most of the issues are noise, honestly. Most of the issues are, how do you communicate at a light enough level, but with enough variety so that the people can step up to the parts that they're interested in and able to intervene on or have a huge stake in. And that information management, I think, is one of the most critical functions of getting that governance to work effectively.
And one last thing to also cap off this thread, which I realized as Venkatesh was speaking, is it reminds me of how, when you mentioned the Constitution thing, Constitution DAO specifically, not Constitution, we're not at that level yet where they generalize, but which is the, that it might also, even just that measure of active groups might not even be the most effective measure. I would be surprised if it's a thing where it is that, but for much significantly shorter time durations. And maybe there's a small, maybe we should very actively trace our what's it called? Like a surge metric and Uber surge pricing. This is our surge capacity versus our standard. Because I've heard this comparisons of, maybe Web3 empowers more events where just suddenly, spontaneously, unexpected for like an hour, thousands of people show up in like one specific place in person. Yeah, not on average. Yeah, but really interesting discussion.
Yeah, I think we sort of use the same term, surge events, for like things like the annual meeting where we have sort of like a surge in participants. So that's interesting to hear. Any other questions, comments? All right. Yeah, okay, once more plugging in the chat, Fridays, 11 Central, if anybody's interested in discussing these things. Yeah, so I think next up, Venkat, so I think we wanted to sort of do a post-project discussion on innovation essays, which was not published. And I think David McDougall was the one who led it. He's not here. Venkat, I know you contributed. Do you want to speak quickly to it? And the next, after that, it's Future Frontiers, which is you. So.
Okay, so since I was involved in both projects in different ways, I thought it would be good to talk about what hasn't worked with the Yak Collective. So we've I think, publicized and talked about projects that we actually successfully landed, and then we've tweeted them and they've been shared, and we've gotten a little bit of praise for the things we've actually pulled off. So it's interesting to focus on what we didn't pull off. And I think I would say 99% of the things we ever talk of doing never actually happen. But most of them are not actually interesting to talk about, because I would say of the 99% of things that don't happen, 90% never even get past the idle chatter on Discord stage, which is fine. You should have a healthy baseline level of people just spitballing and saying, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that. So most of those don't bother me, because they're abandoned at the right stage of low investment. It's if you spend 5 minutes talking about a thing and then it doesn't happen, no big loss. So I think the things worth doing a serious autopsy on are things that get really, really far, but then sort of choke at the last minute. And I'll talk about both the projects in the same bucket. The first one was innovation consulting. So I think neither Dave nor Juan is here. So both are great guys, and they came up with this idea of a lot of us here are consultants who've had some experience either in the innovation sector, so R&D work, academia, or wherever, as well as consulting around R&D initiatives in industry. So the thought was, maybe we can write a set of essays about common problems in the innovation sector and common solution patterns that work. And then we published that as an essay collection on problems and solutions. And we each proposed a problem we wanted to write about. And Juan and Dave kind of did the editorial thing of vetting it, challenging us, and testing those ideas. And we basically wrote 2 essays each, a question essay posing the problem and an answer essay sort of framing the answer. And the idea was we would post the question essays, and whoever posted the question essay would also contribute an answer essay, but anybody else could also contribute an answer essay. So the collection was hoping to be broad. So to give an example, the question essay I proposed and Dave and Juan accepted and I wrote was what I call the good enough problem. And it was kind of a pun on when companies get really big, they start doing incremental progress, and very low barriers to innovation or bars are set, and very low good enough problems are the only things the company becomes capable of doing. But on the other hand, good enough is also the last name of a famous researcher who invented lithium-ion batteries. And that was a huge quantum leap in innovation. So the title was a play on words of how do we go from good enough innovations to good enough innovations, right? And I then wrote that essay. Then we proposed one particular answer, which is somebody like Elon Musk comes along and shakes up an risk-averse industry with bold assumptions, and then the industry becomes capable of doing quantum leaps. So that was my pair. And there were 6 other people who wrote pairs of essays like this. And Juan and Dave, what they did right was really enforce strong, high standards on, we want these to be really high quality essays, better than what Harvard Business Review publishes or, academic publishing. And we, I think, got there. We, the essays were really good as far as we got them. The problem was, I think the quality assurance got out of hand. And towards the end, the standards were so high that we couldn't find the energy to actually wrap up and finish the project. So what we have right now is a bunch of really good pairs of essays sitting around in a Google Doc. And Juan got busy with his own book that he was publishing and a new project he was kicking off. I think Dave ended up getting a new job that was demanding all his time. And because they had set such high standards for what a finished product would look like, nobody else had the bandwidth to sort of pick it up and finish it, because that would have meant lowering the standards a lot. So this is my diagnosis on why the project failed, which was very laudable that it started out with high aspirations, but because of the high aspirations, when the principles driving it through completely circumstantial derailments ended up not being able to take it past the finish line, it was kind of it had momentum trying to reach low Earth orbit, and then it suddenly became it would plummet back to Earth in quality terms. So that's one postmortem. The other one was the Future Frontiers project. So this was proposed and started by another, damn, I'm blanking on his name now. He's from India. Siva, I think Siva. He was briefly active early on in the Yak Collective, and the idea was we would identify a bunch of topics where, like, frontiers are still open and you can go explore, like, the bottom of the ocean, space, nanotechnology, blah, blah, blah. So, and we would write little short essays in the form of like slide decks, so a couple of like slides of like interesting pictures and like bits of text. And this one was the other extreme. It had fairly low threshold for standards and participation. We had like a dozen people like proposing like draft slides. We had a slide deck evolving. But again, in this case, Siva got busy with work and had to drop out. But in this case, the standards were low enough that somebody could backstop. And I was the one who did that. So I stepped up and said, let's get whatever we have out in some form at least. And I think when we started, we had like 15, 20 people contributing slides. By the time it kind of like ran out of energy, we had maybe 7 or 8 people who had contributed slides. And if you go on I can share very quickly. Let's see, Future Frontiers. Hold on, let me pull up the page and I'll share in a second to show you guys where we actually got. Yeah, so this is what we actually ended up publishing. And I'm pretty proud that we were actually backstop and put something out at all. So you can see that we have 6 modules published. So by the way, Jenna is responsible for this output format. Initially, we were going to publish this as a slide deck, same as the Don't Waste the Reboot and New Old Home projects which had come before. But Jenna argued that, slide decks are a primitive dinosaur format and we should be moving to more modern formats. And she came up with this sort of linear flow slide deck online kind of thing, where we basically have slide-like things with little bits of text attached and this nice format of like color-coded. Each section has its own color. I think I wrote this one on ocean exploration. Let's see, what else was, I think John Grant wrote one. This one is Kanan Ramaswamy. Yeah, we had a bunch. Jay Kalauer wrote this thing about longevity and like, cryostasis on long space flights. So yeah, we got something done. So I would call this sort of a half-ass, let's do what we can and get it out. So I'm pretty proud that we got at least this out. Yeah, this is not what we were shooting for. So I would call this project kind of like a recovered failure. So in terms of post-mortem, I think it's reasonable to expect sort of an attrition rate where if you have like 100 things being proposed in Discord, 80 will never get past the shit posting on a Discord channel stage. 10 might get something of a start where people pull together some sort of like, quick chat or call and maybe discuss for a few weeks, but nothing comes of it. Then of the remaining 10, maybe they actually kick off and somebody starts a working document. People start like writing a little bit of code or writing a little bit of text or slides. And I would say maybe 3 or 4 actually make it out of the publication pipeline at the other end. And of the 3 or 4 that actually make it, I would say maybe 1 or 2 actually hit the standards they were aiming for. And the rest kind of like have a half-ass that sort of make the best of it kind of output. So this is a pretty brutal attrition rate in a pipeline for publication. And when I compare to like, working in a corporate environment in an annual planning cycle, say, this is probably what's happening in many big corporations right now. Projects get proposed around September or October, they get budgeted, they get kicked off. By January, it's clear kind of which ones are kind of like half-assed and getting overwhelmed with middle management and bureaucracy and are going to go nowhere, which ones are going to get somewhere. So I think our survival and output statistics are actually not much worse than corporate America. The difference is we don't bullshit. Like it's very hard to like, pretend things are working when they're not in this kind of online Discord-based way of producing things. Whereas in many of the big companies I consult for, you put on a brave face, you produce a lot of bullshit PowerPoints, you pretend something has happened when it hasn't. You take like work from like 5 years ago and repackage it and claim it's new work done this year. So a lot of bullshit happens in sort of traditional organizations that allows you to pretend that more has happened than actually has happened. And this is my own experience, both companies I've consulted for and worked in, where it looks at the end of the year, the CEO sends out a communication email saying, hey, we had so many great successes, but everybody inside, if you talk to them, they know that, yeah, of the 100 projects that were tried, only one or two really kind of hit it out of the park with like actual movement and success. Of the rest, it was varying degrees of like bullshit that happened. And some of them like just kept alive previous years' initiatives and so forth. So I wouldn't say I painted a depressing picture of failure and how things kind of like don't succeed, but it's not actually as bad as it looks. It's just a much more honest understanding, because nobody has time on something like the Yak Collective to put up a theater of success where none exists. So that's, I think, the big difference between something like the Yak Collective and I'm sure other DAOs and DAO-like things out there, which is, since there's nobody internally managing an internal PR and communications department and an external marketing face trying to paint a pretty picture where none exists, you end up seeing the naked reality of like how things actually are. And if it looks depressing and dispiriting and you lose motivation and drop out because of this, survival rate or poor statistics, that's probably for the best, because you're walking in with the wrong expectations of how much things will succeed. But if you can look at this picture and say, hey, these are the statistics, these are the survival rate, this is what happens, because part of the time we're on the Probation Quadrant, like just getting nowhere. And you're still willing to work with those expectations and get or bank whatever wins you can actually do fun things. Like I'm actually personally, I would say I enjoy my experience with the Yak Collective better than with my corporate environment work. So that's my post-mortem on these two projects together. So yeah, I'd like to actually open up comments first from other people who've participated in other things that have not worked out at the Yak Collective. If you want to chime in with your autopsy comments, and then we can have maybe questions from others as well. Anybody else? Things that haven't worked out?
Yeah.
I get. Oh,
yeah, I was just gonna add. Yeah, it's also like there was no incentive to bullshit either, as in nobody's going to there is no money to be made, or nobody's going to see if I'm just bullshitting that something got done. So I think that's like one reason why things like people are sort of okay with things getting stalled. And I think initially there was this sort of, or at least personally, I felt there was a sort of tension of, or the energy is disappearing on a particular project. That's bad. We need to do something to get the up the energy. But I think with time we have sort of like made peace with how things emerge, and sometimes we have seen that things sort of like discussions sort of kick back in again when there's sort of enough people talking about something. So yeah, I think for the Astonishing Stories project, I sort of wanted to do a second version of it, and I think I actually tried to kick things off a couple of times, and nothing really sort of stuck. And now we are sort of exploring what a second version of it would look like, and I feel like there's more sort of more energy on it than before. So yeah.
I'll also add, I think something of sort of a constellation, not necessarily failures, but where we haven't made as much progress as we've liked from the infrastructure side, has been that it just turns out that a lot of things that everybody presents as very simple. And I'm as guilty as the last person who's like, oh, this should be easy. The mathematicians, the solution exists, but there's lots and lots of fiddly bits to it. And so that's one thing we've run into with, Jenna mentioned trying to automate the newsletter, and that's been something I've been trying to help with. But it turns out that there's just a lot of questions about like, well, how do you actually aggregate this information? How do you determine what to choose here? And just way more decision points. And so the idea of, well, just pull a string from Discord sounds simple, but then the devil becomes very much in the details. And I think that actually has slowed things down with a lot of infrastructure projects, is just as we've gotten bogged down into that. And it's not just that nobody wants to make a decision, it's just there's just a lot of decisions to be made, and it's not always clear how to implement a particular thing. And that, if anything, that's given me a lot more appreciation for how slow the pace of development is in large organizations.
I'll add that we almost lost the Art of Online Governance paper. I think like we worked on it for a couple months through the summer, and then everyone kind of got busy in September, and then we remembered like, hey, we've got this thing. And I can't remember if it was Sachin or Venkat made a very good like call out of like, hey, if we don't do this now, this is never going to get done. And they both did a really good job of pushing us towards the finish. So I think everybody that's been participating kind of has intuited how the energy levels flow around these parts. Another example is like the Yak Fit channel has kind of ebbed and flowed. It's not been super active recently, but it was very active like early spring, I'd say. And I think there was a lot of desire to have a project. A lot of the conversation early happened around wearables. Quite a few of us had the Whoop band, and we were comparing metrics and trying to figure out how that works, and what is a wearable for like non-serious athletes like Yaks look like. And I think there was push to kind of enter a project, and I think we wisely realized like that's very ambitious, and none of us have the energy to take that on right now. It's definitely something I'm still very interested in, and I'm sure the others that have been involved in those conversations are as well. But that's like I think a good example of like recognizing let's not bite off more than we can chew right now.
Jordan?
Yeah, there's a couple things that came to mind. I think first of all, just on the non-bullshit thing, I was very grateful for the ability to scale back my involvement gracefully and hand over things like Discord admin. And then I'm talking to Jenna now about resuming some infrastructure involvement. But the other two things that really stood out to me, I ran a philosophy reading group for a while here, and that one ended up dying the death of incompatible schedules. The people that are interested in incredibly niche things were also incredibly busy, and that may get revived at some point. But I think a better fit for that will be in a directed reading, the way that the online governance reading groups have been as well, instead of just casual interest. The other thing that I had really hoped would take off, and it got further than the 5 minutes of bullshitting on Discord, but not too much more, was the Darren Kong had been working on a re-envisioning policing thing that had gotten some momentum, but I don't think there was anybody that was willing and able to drive it. There's also, Sachin, I think you were involved maybe on the like future of dating thing, which had two potential principles, but there was like fundamentally incompatible visions as to what the purpose of the project would be. And I think that project died just because they recognized we're trying to do two different things with this and it can't do both. So those were what came to mind for me.
I think one of the things that's happened since we started with our very first project is we've learned a bunch of things implicitly that those of us who've been around recognize, but we should probably do a better job of articulating it. So for example, we know that, in the very beginning, there was a big surge of enthusiasm and many things can get done in surges, and that's a good thing. It happened after the last annual meeting. After this annual meeting too, I expect there'll be a surge of enthusiasm and certain things can get done in that surge. But I think we've learned to accept what surges can do, but not sort of rely on them as the sustaining pattern. And we've kind of learned to have, I think, good calibration on, all right, when is a idle chatter on Discord more than idle curiosity and likely to level up? And when should people actually invest some energy into it? And when will the right kind of nudge into a little bit more structure, like let's start up a shared Google Doc, even that, when is it likely to lead anywhere versus just you have yet another dead Google Doc in your drive. So I think we've kind of tacitly learned some of the judgment and come up with heuristics about when to push harder to keep a project growing versus when to give up and quit. So for example, one of the heuristics that Grigory mentioned in the governance paper was you get max 2 tries at a project. Like if a project, you try it once and it dies, and then you revive it and try once again, third time is likely to be basically impossible. I think they say this about marriages as well. The probability of a marriage surviving is 50% first marriage, 75% or 25% second marriage. And by the third marriage, you're basically a slightly formal serial dater, right? So this kind of heuristic you only learn if you watched enough projects evolve. And I think we've kind of internalized a bunch of such heuristics and we've developed a certain patience with it. So if you've been around a while, you learn to roll with it. But I don't want to treat that as sort of just permanently lowering standards and being complacent about, hey, 99% of things are always going to fail and things are going to if they succeed at all, they'll do so by lowering standards as much as possible. So there is headroom to do better. I think with better ideas for organizing, better tools and technologies, even just the influence of people dropping in with smarter experience and organizing skills, things can level up radically. I think, for example, Oliver King, who isn't on this meeting, he joined us briefly and was very active for several months. And he was instrumental in running something we called a Yakathon early in April and doing a lot of good organizing. And he was an admin for a while. And that was a very valuable contribution. And I think all of us are hoping when he has time, he pops back in and helps a little bit. So when somebody like Oliver is around, for example, our game at organizing simply gets leveled up. When somebody's like Nathan is active on the website, our IT infrastructure game gets leveled up. So a large part of what you can do is simply what kinds of backstoppers are around and active and able to do things. And if not, you kind of have to be patient and accept whatever low standards will keep things chugging along and alive, waiting for these surge moments in terms of either raw capacity or the right skills coming online at the right time. So in a way, I think the philosophy we've adopted is, prepare for the worst, but hope for the best, but in a different way, as in keep the baseline active and alive at kind of the lowest possible base metabolic rate that is sustainable, but keep the doors open to like much higher skill and competence and energy levels whenever those are available in Windows. Yeah, Stephen, you had something?
Yeah, and maybe I can be missing some deeper kind of philosophy or context here, but it seems like an impression I'm getting, I'm curious, it seems kind of that there's kind of this assumption about a kind of our production, that a given production, if anything, the quality bar can only go up, that the scope can only rise. And I'm curious how much is there just might be an inability to let things really, there's a difference between iteration on the surface versus a deep strategic iteration. I'm curious how much we might just be missing an ability for some reason, this really jumps up. Earlier, we were talking about Gaia, and what I kind of intuitively grasp about that notion, I'm curious if an example of, from what I think we mentioned, the Future Frontiers project, we might have a lot of high quality, dense energy brought in on a project and something that's kind of has to be paused. And if it's something that we can't properly repackage as a work in progress and hold off for a reinvigoration or whatever you call it, the shock test where they rub things together and resuscitate it later on, then I feel like the most Gaian wilding approach to that would be to have the equivalent of decomposers come in and pull and eat away at that carcass and extract and repurpose and repackage some of the actual lessons learned in that project, and maybe the unidirectional push towards producing the project we set out to do. I assume we're not doing that corporate of an approach to things, but that just like is something that I can't get out my head when we're talking about the project attrition.
So yeah, we've had a couple of if I understood your point correctly, yeah, we've had a couple of discussions about this phenomenon. So on the one hand, we have projects like Astonishing Stories and also Future Frontiers. At one point, we decided to use basically what we would call a permaculture format for publishing, which is, we called it an infinity pool, which is have like a very low unit size for contribution thresholds, as in you can like contribute a couple of slides and it goes into the project. And the publishing format is this sort of infinite pipeline of somebody produces a new module, it just goes on there and it can keep going. And this was called the infinity pool concept. And this was sort of I don't know, it was kind of a way to rescue the intentions of like a more intense single publication event kind of project. So both projects initially started out with, we will have a full collection of stories, or we'll have a very polished slide deck. And when we realized that wasn't going to happen, we kind of said, all right, we'll lower the standards, publish what we have, but then leave the door open for people to keep adding. And that's one way to do things, which is keep the original intention alive, set up some sort of structural permaculture capability. But in practice, what's happened is there have been no contributions to Future Frontiers since the first few that we actually put out, even though the door is open. Like infrastructure-wise, that door is open. And if somebody says, hey, I want to do like a little module on, I don't know, drones as a frontier, and I just want to slap together a few slides and put them on the website, you can do that. So anybody who wants to do that, yes, please contact me and we'll get you set. But it hasn't happened, to be frank. Same thing with the Astonishing Stories. Sachin, maybe you can speak to that. Like you set it up to be an infinity pool, but I think at most you got like one more story after the initial burst. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I think it's partly because, yeah, I think after we published the initial set of stories, one other person sort of reached out, but it sort of partly fell apart on my side as well, because I was pretty constrained at that point. But yeah, we had one more person reach out. That was it.
So, I think part of the problem on this permaculture direction of solutions is actually to address exactly what Sachin said, which is automate things enough that actually no handholding or editorial guidance is needed for it to remain in permaculture mode. Like even if you want to contribute to Future Frontiers, unfortunately right now, you would have to go through a little bit of editorial flow, which means I have to be available with some time to like, you know, do an editorial pass on whatever you contribute, and then like maybe ping Nathan and Jenna to put it out on the website. But if that was super automated, where it's like, put it up as draft status through using automated tools, and then just anybody can quickly do and copy edit pass, and then it automatically hits a publish button, that would actually make the permaculture pattern work a lot more. But to your other point of should that actually be done at all, and should you sometimes just like take the thing apart, scavenge it, decompose it, and try and capture value and recycle it into the nutrient ecosystem, I think that's a great pattern too. I just don't think somebody else correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I've seen any example of that happening on the Yak Collective yet. And I don't, off the top of my head, I can't think of infrastructure that would enable that, where you could just like take the decomposed nutrients from a failed project and like usefully feed it into the, I don't know, soil of a new project. Anybody else want to speak to that? Have you seen something that looks like that?
I would call it failing upwards, meaning if you did a project and it fell apart, but you got somewhere, you should be using that in the next project, whether yours or somebody else's project. And that's in fact should be a goal when you know that you have a 90% failure rate. So
Yeah. So I think failing upwards is an aspiration of which we have no instances yet, but I think we are trying a first one, like Astonishing Stories. I would say it's not a failure. We did publish it, and the infinity pool aspect failed. But Sachin and I have talked about, trying to pivot it into an NFT focused design fiction thing, which we are tentatively calling Astonishing Objects. So just like little descriptions of like things that might exist in the future. So if that works out, that would be a success story of like, taking some decomposed pieces and I don't know, resurrecting the phoenix-like new project out of the ashes out of an old one, mixing all sorts of metaphors here. But, anyway, so yeah, that's all I had in terms of this postmortem on quote unquote failed projects discussion. So unless there are more questions, we can move on to the next part of the agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Venkat. So I think we have a 5 minute break on the agenda. So yeah, I think we can take the 5 minute break now. It's 10:45 Central Time. So come back around 10:50 and we'll begin with the Yak Robot project, and it will be led by Mayor Finster. All right, see you guys in 5 minutes. Hey, so yeah, I think we can start with the Yak Rover project overview and sort of what has happened till now, Mayor. Mayor not joined. Okay.
Hi. Okay, you can follow me on Figma if you want. You just click on my icon, or you can just look at the screen. I'm going to pick up where Venkatesh left off and talk a second how the Yak Rover project came into being. So first of all, I'm a member of the Yak Rover project. I'm what's called a build leader, which is a fancy way of saying I'm one of the people building a robot. The project started a little bit more than a year ago, and you can see here how the project started. Somebody, in this case, Venkatesh, had an idea. He prepared a proposal. We put it in a Discord channel, and then a home page describe what's happening. And then, like he writes, the first order of business is identifying participants. So people started joining. I was one of them. Now, the project evolved. It's not exactly what we thought it would be. There was perhaps a more hierarchical vision in the design of the project. But the other 99 projects that didn't happen started exactly the same way. Somebody made a proposal. We put it on the relevant home page. We put it in the incubator. People got the opportunity to join. If people joined, it grew up. If people didn't, it didn't. Right now, in this project, we have active collaborators from all over the world. We just had an annual meeting 2 days ago, and it was 7 a.m. Sunday morning Pacific time, but midnight Japan time. Us people in the middle enjoyed it. And of course, collaborations happen not only at our weekly meetings, they happen all the time. And part of what we're doing is figuring out how to do collaborations between people who are working in similar or different technologies in different parts of the world with different schedules. We have people joining and leaving with crunches or without crunches. Okay. So let me just give you an overview of what I have on the Figma page. Here's a link to our home page. Here's a link to our summer school recorded videos. Here's some clips from the demo day. Here's some screenshots which Jenna collected during the Rover Day, and I'll talk about some of them. And at the end, we have actual recording of the demo day, parts of it, because my computer is not willing to handle a 5-hour meeting for some reason. So we just had a demo day, and during the demo day, what we did, I'm sorry, was I not visible before?
You're visible.
Okay. During the demo day, we were supposed to show our builds and have several sessions for onboarding newbies who might be interested in joining rovers or the robotic field. We got carried away doing other things, but the material is still there, and we're going to use it. So let me first show you a few clips. Some of them from the demo day itself, and some of them from the separation. So here's the first build. Oh, excuse me. I don't know how to do it yet. Okay. So this is a build called gradient ascent. And it's a very sophisticated robot. It has a built-in AI board from called Jetson, and it's using its camera to identify when it's going past its boundaries. Okay, this is an example of a build which is an existing rover designed by somebody else, and the emphasis is on, let's call it AI. Okay. We had a surprise guest invited by Venkatesh. Kayama.
So the main thing that I wanted to do was to have a mast with a video camera on it that you could rotate and tilt and extend. And so that's just a linear actuator. The servos in the mast are actually directly controlled off of the RC receiver, but there is an Arduino, because it turns out that in order to extend a linear actuator, you have to reverse the polarity on the power going into the actuator, and the only way to do that, can't do that directly on an Arduino. You have to get the Arduino to control a pair of relays, and then that's an FPV camera that's just mounted at the top of the mast, and so. And then it feeds into that little screen that's on top of the receiver, which.
Okay. Now we have a presentation. This is Venkatesh of his build.
These joins that you see between aluminum and 3D junctions, the reason I went with the strategy is I want to do modularity and extensibility. And in the future, if I just want to make this rover much larger, if the electrical harness can actually handle the distance, I would just like replace the tubes and make it longer. And then you get a bigger rover and, you know, interchangeable parts and so forth. You've got the SG90s in there. You've got the drive motors. I don't know if you can see very well. You've got the N20. There's a 1:100 ratio thing. You've got the. I haven't yet hooked up the wires for the motors themselves.
Okay. And here's another build where instead of going from the bottom up, we're again taking an existing design and adding software to it. So this is a rover walking outside. Here's an example of a rover which is built in a minimalistic way of looking at things. Okay, so different design philosophy. Here's a sophisticated build, which includes both a rover and a flying drone, which will work together. The rover is showing off control protocols. This was printed based on a ESA design. Okay, so what you see is a wide range of different designs. And one of the things that we did in the demo day, which was a lot of fun, was we gave whoever joined us the opportunity to remotely control two rovers that were having a midnight jaunt in Tokyo. And it didn't exactly go the way we wanted to. So first, let me show you what the control panel looks like. This is a web server served by these two rovers. It shows you
the feed is back online, huh?
AFW is back.
Okay,
I'm trying to move it a little bit. I'll stop now. Let's just designate one person to control AFW.
Yeah, LRA, who wants to control it? Who are in LRA?
Can I have a try?
Yes.
in
Okay.
the upper
so you will
right
be the
corner, you
controlling.
can see a top view of the rovers.
Same with
Small.
AFW. One person please control it. I'm not controlling AFW anymore.
So it is James.
Okay. And after, I don't know, 40 minutes of excitement and technical problems and experiences, we got to the end game, which is the two rovers trying to knock down this structure.
The same distance they were before, okay?
But it's pointed in the right direction, so like 5 steps it should knock over.
But
Almost.
why is a little bit more?
Little bit left, I think, and then a couple of steps it should be done.
But which is this rover that is coming closer?
This is AFW.
Yours. The person. Can we see AFW?
Oh, this is
The person holding the camera
this is
is
close.
Eric, and he couldn't join us again. It's 2 in the morning in Japan now. Okay, who's gonna win?
Somebody's doing a high walk. I think that's AFW doing a high walk.
It's the high walk is the LRA. LRA, yeah.
Yeah, it's LRA. Okay.
Oh, this is getting close.
that is me controlling it.
All right.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
somebody do it.
Yes,
me. All right.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, we're gonna kick. Okay, so that is a demo day. Now we have weekly meetings. And one of the things we've done in the past, I don't know, 15 weekly meetings is each participant presented the status of their project, which includes, describing what you did and what you didn't do and interesting things that happened, but also took upon themselves a subject which they talked about some more. For example, abductive reasoning or sensors or hobbyists or a robotic operating system. All of this information, of course, is available on the internet to whoever wants it. Maybe a few more words about the structure of the project. So I see the Yak Rover project. First of all, it shows how the Yak Collective, I don't know if you remember a few hours ago, Benny said that we're kind of moving from a place that's based on gigs to something else. So what we have here is not so much a place for consultants, but a distributed creation location while having fun. Has some distributed aspects to it, and hopefully it will get on the blockchain twice. Once, if and when we become a DAO, and the second time when we put blockchain into the rovers themselves. Each rover hopefully will host a blockchain connection. So the way I see it, this project has 3 different types of goals. The first type is internal meaning for the Yak Collective itself. So one of the things that you saw here is that we are showing and developing the concept of exploring biodiversity. Not only are the people diverse, and each one of the members of the project comes from a completely different place, but also the builds are different and the goals are different. And somehow all together we're trying to move forward towards some general vision. And the vision is, which I haven't mentioned, is the following. We hope that in 10 years, Elon Musk will reduce the cost of flying 1 pound to Mars to a price that people can handle. And that means a lot of people will want to send rovers to Mars because people are expensive and you can't put them in small boxes. And they probably will not be all the same type of rover. And the question is, how do they talk to each other? What do they do all day? And we're trying to answer these questions. The second thing you see here is that we're showcasing learning by doing. Okay, there's a concrete output, actual rovers, you saw some movies. We're showcasing collaboration on a complex project. Rovers are incredibly complex. They have design issues, they have hardware, they have mechanics, they have environment, software and 4 different abstraction levels, connection to the internet. They're very complex and collaboration is not easy. And that's one of the things that we're exploring. And perhaps the last one is we're not here to work. We're here to have fun. I'm sure you noticed everybody is having fun with their builds. Nobody's doing it because they're told to do it, or because they have to do it, or because it's coursework. They're doing it because they want to do it, and it's also good for them. What do I mean by good for them? One of the goals of this project, if you look at it from a personal level of the Yak himself or herself, is to give people actual technical experience in a complicated project. Now, in the rover meeting, Venkatesh made a big point that in industry, usually you get to handle only a small part of the stack. But here, since you're doing your own build, you get to touch all of the different issues, whether it's power, software, image processing, mechanical failure, it's all on you. So it gives you an opportunity to learn. That's a good reason for doing it. The second thing that it does, hopefully, since we can see that the robotics field is exploding. It gives people the opportunity to learn enough about the field. So if they want to go into consulting for companies that deal in robotics, they know enough to start. It's also very useful that the people on the team are diverse. They weren't chosen by some HR manager. And that means you can learn from each other. People are very different in their style, in their technology understanding, in their choices. For me personally, you know, the first step of going into robotics is very difficult. Which robot should I buy? What should I do with it? Being part of this group was wonderful. And the last note, while robotics are very technical, some of the questions are not technical at all. They have to do with the humanities, aesthetics. How should a robot look? How should it act? What is motivation for a robot? And of course, hopefully what we're doing here has external effects. It has already attracted people to the Yak Collective. Hopefully people will be able to showcase their builds or publications when looking for jobs. And maybe most important, we are intentionally generating artifacts which can be used by other hobbyists. So we have recordings of what we do. We have recordings of talks. We have software repositories, and we have stories. Okay, I guess that's it before I'm told that I ran out of time. Feel free to explore the Figma. I haven't showed you everything. Any questions about the project, how you join it? What else might a project look like?
I guess, Maya, I just wonder, so like kind of this year is culminated in like a live demo day. Like what's the, is there a milestone that's targeted for next year and like the next round of a demo or something like that, is it?
Okay, so yes, but first of all, when you deal with robots, you always want to have a live demo. Okay, what's the point of having little mechanical things moving around and squeaking if you can't see them and play with them and do them? One of the things that we talked about in the meeting was what are our goals for next year? And see, we do not here. We had originally these goals. Okay, we said the first year was exploration. The second year we would build perhaps 1 or 2 more ambitious builds. And then for the next 8 years, who knows what we're going to do. One of the things that we asked, and we had a discussion which is about an hour long, an hour and a half, and can be found here. Okay, so here we have a open discussion talking about what people are looking for and where we're going to go. And in that discussion, we raised 4 or 5 different possibilities of what our goals are for next year. But remember, there's a general goal and an individual goal. Each person has their own goals, what they want to do. Some of the goals are technical. I need to add a feature. For example, I want to add a feature. You saw my robot getting stuck in the grass and banging into a tree. Well, I definitely want to build a feature which will prevent that from happening. Some of the goals are group goals. We definitely want to show interoperability between the rovers working together. And some of the goals are, let's call them stretch goals. Can we make a rover that can learn how to act? Now, we haven't yet defined these goals, but yes, we will have at least one, probably more than one, I hope, live demonstration day where people thumbs over project, and hopefully from outside, this time we had one, will be able to showcase what they're doing and why they're doing and all the different fun things they learned. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, Benny.
Cool. Thanks, Mayor. That was really fun to watch.
Andrew.
Oh yeah, Andrew. Yeah. Do you want to say what time are the weekly meetings at? Do you want to give details on that?
It's too complicated for me to figure it out. I can tell you what it says on Discord. I mean, I know for me, the meetings are 7:45 a.m. But that's UTC +2.
Yeah, it's 5:45 UTC. So out here on the West Coast US, it's 9:45 p.m. on Mondays. So it would be Tuesday morning UTC 5:45. So it's Tuesday morning 7:45 for Mayor and Anuraj, I think, and for Eric in Japan, I think it's around 3 p.m. So if you're in the US, it's going to be 9:45 to 12:45. It's bad for East Coast people, but US West Coast and most of Asia and Europe should be fine. So this project does not like New Yorkers.
Okay. Yeah. So I think I'll do a quick overview of astonishing stories pretty quickly and sort of like the direction we're going in. Share my screen. All right. Yeah, so astonishing stories sort of started off as I forgot the book. It was called, yeah, the book is called Astounding. I think I discovered it through Venkat, which was basically sort of a biography of all the main characters of the golden age of science fiction. Really good read. And essentially, I wanted to sort of LARP as a science fiction editor. So that's how the spun this project up. And initially, Amanda Reeves, who's based out of Australia, she was actively part of the Yak Collective in the early projects. So she was the other lead editor on this. And how we organized this was, so I think this was sort of an increase in complexity in terms of organization. So we sort of, after the first two projects, which were mostly reports. And so what we wanted to do was play this sort of scenario generation game called The Thing from the Future. And essentially we had, I think, 2 or 3 sessions of this game. And the idea was to generate design fiction based on certain constraints. So the constraints in this were, so arc is the narrative progressing, or is it going downward? So growing arc terrain is a specific field. So education object was supposed to be the specific design function that you were supposed to develop. And mood was, yeah, is it exciting? Is it dystopian? And so this sort of gave sort of enough constraint to create some interesting design fiction, and which is in this sort of Rome that we created, where you can sort of go and see all the fragments that we created. They are kind of fun to read. And yeah, and I think, and the second part of the project was sort of like connect these fragments to form some kind of scenarios, which didn't really happen. Like it felt like, I think by the time we felt that the energy had sort of dissipated and it involved too much coordination. So what we settled on was whoever wants to write a short speculative fiction, they can use these future fragments in their stories, and they can be sort of like jumping off points to think about different things. So combine these future fragments in whatever ways they want. And that's sort of how we got to the set of 6 stories that we published. And like Venkat said, the goal was initially to have this infinity scroll of like more stories being published, but that didn't really happen. And I think Venkat did a thread on this on Twitter when this came out, and sort of rightly pointed out, like the writing is nobody here on the project was a published fiction writer. So while the writing is kind of could be choppy, I think the sort of like patterns it uncovers are pretty interesting. So that was the early version of the project, and now I think if you can check out the Astonishing Stories channel on the Discord, and we have been sort of playing around with the idea of going back to sort of like the basics of these fragments and these design fiction elements, and creating like small illustrations of those design fiction elements, and sort of experimenting with publishing it on like Web3 platforms. So I think an early experiment that I did personally was sort of publish a short story of mine as an NFT, and all the illustrations on these were done by Justice, who's another member of the Yak Collective, and I've been working with him on a personal project where he's sort of like developing a design fiction for a specific short story that I wrote. And the idea was to have the design fiction as an NFT and the short story just published as a normal essay on Mirror with the design fiction embedded. So those are the sort of like ideas we're playing around with, basically using Web3 publishing technologies to see like, is there interesting ways to publish design fiction and fiction. And it's still pretty early stages in terms of like what direction it will take. We're still sort of exploring, and I think so I sort of had to take a bit of a backseat with spending some time on the online governance paper and work stuff that I had going on. But I'm hoping to sort of get into it more over Christmas break. So yeah, join the Astonishing Stories channel under projects, and we generally post things that we find interesting, and have discussions there. That's it for my overview. Any questions? Or yeah. All right. I think next up, Venkat. I think it's a section on Web3 and blockchain.
All right. It's actually a very good segue point, since I think the Astonishing Stories project, if there's like a whole medium is the message kind of aspect to the Yak Collective, based on like the technology stack we're using, like trying to just connect the dots of everything we've talked about, like the infrastructure map that Nathan shared very early on, with Discord, Roam, things like that. And you look at that as somebody called us a proto DAO. And it's kind of interesting that a few people who were originally part of the Yak Collective, sort of burging in their achievements a little bit, but they claim to have gotten inspiration from us to actually go on to do DAOs before us. So the Cabin DAO and Rafa, who's now involved with Mirror, both of them have said that what we are up to kind of inspired them to do what they're doing. So we are already set up very naturally for a blockchain-y future, and projects like the Astonishing Stories are actually almost a perfect medium as the message fit, because like if you did design fictions in the form of little vignettes about objects that might exist in the future, and you make little artworks out of them and little descriptions, you can make trading card type things out of them, sell them as NFTs, create like this open extended universe where people can tell stories. So there's almost a perfect natural fit. And as Mayor mentioned, the Yak Rover project also has like a angle there where if you have a bunch of like robots running around, it's taking this idea of like DAOs as a mix of automation and humans to the logical extreme of the real world, where robots are like Internet of Things objects that exist in the real world. And if they're on the blockchain, you've now got like a community of humans, human meat bags in meat space, and robot, I guess, metal bags in metal space. And then you've got this online web area they can live in. So we kind of have this convergence of medium message fit with the types of projects we're doing. And the infrastructure we are using to do it, it's kind of meshing well. And it's kind of natural that we think about blockchain stuff. A little bit of context when we, can everybody see my screen? Yeah. When we first started the Yak Collective in, I guess, April or May of 2020, we immediately had a huge flood of interest from blockchain types even then. So we had people flooding into the server, sort of trying to like talk up their blockchain technologies, their DAO tool stacks and so forth. And on Twitter, a bunch of people reached out to me saying, use my platform for issuing tokens and so forth. And it left a bad taste in my mouth personally, because the problem with a lot of blockchain stuff is all the people in the crypto scene are so excited about using the tools, and the worst fringe of it is they're so excited about like potential appreciation and like the assets involved, like whatever tokens you used, that it kind of overwhelms anything it touches. So even though it's a very exciting technology that can do a lot, the first order of business when you get into blockchain is to keep all the annoying blockchain dynamics out of the picture. So it sounds weird to say it this way, but it really is. Like when we first got in, the reason we didn't dive in straight away is because everything threatened to like suck up all the air in the room. We did run a very early experiment without using blockchain at all, where it was just a spreadsheet where people could give each other fake tokens. So there's no blockchain or anything. It was just like, Venkat gives such an one Yak coin for doing such and such an interesting thing, that kind of protocol. And we were playing with it. There's an archive channel somewhere that you can look at where we were just like using a Discord, or sorry, Zapier integration to post updates to the spreadsheet on the Discord channel. So basically you had like a Venmo type stream of X is paying Y so many Yak bucks to, for having done this. So it gave us a little taste of what was possible. But, and then I think very briefly, I think it was Phil Wolf, who tried to write a custom script to actually do some blockchain-y stuff for us, but that kind of fell through. It was one of the 99% failed projects. I think there's an old archive channel for that as well. But I think what finally actually got this going in a serious way is I started seriously exploring on a personal level. I minted a couple of NFTs and I got a sense of like what this whole thing was actually about. And I kind of updated my priors on how mature it was. Like the previous time I checked out MetaMask and like the infrastructure for actually using Web3, it felt to me like it was super janky and was unusable by normal people. That was one problem. The other problem was Ethereum gas fees were so high, you couldn't do anything useful with it. But in, I guess, November, when I started exploring, I realized the technology had come much farther along and it was much more usable now. So MetaMask wallets, I think, are now at the stage web browsers were in 1993. So they're like ready to actually go mainstream. And the other thing that had happened was a mitigation a class of mitigations has since arisen for high Ethereum fees. So even though Ethereum is a terrible blockchain to work for if you want to save money, like every transaction costs at least like $40 worth of Ether in gas fees. There's other things like the Solana blockchain or all the side chains like XDAI. So there's like this basic infrastructure for doing transactional things on the blockchains. If you're willing to deal with a little bit more jankiness, like newer chains or side chains with cross-chain technology, polychain, things like that, you can actually do things very cheaply. So I think the ground is prepared for very early stage exploration. So what we've started right now is this blockchain roadmap. And what we are doing initially is weekly meetings. Everything we do around here, by the way, those of you who are new to the Yak Collective, if you take away one thing from this entire annual meeting, it is everything happens around a weekly cadence of chat. So activities organized around weekly chat streams, basically. So we have channels where we do asynchronous conversations, and then weekly, either on the Discord voice chat or on Zoom, we have a conversation. That's how anything happens at all. And this one happens on Monday mornings, 8:30 a.m. or sorry, 8 a.m. US West Coast. So that would be, I think it's a UTC -8, so 12 noon UTC. That's our blockchain governance meeting. And we've had like 3 so far. And let me just scroll through this, what we have so far. So what we did, one of the first things we did was set up a treasury. So this is a multi-sig wallet, and these are the people with signing authority. I think it's a 2 of 5 wallet. So we have a little bit of money in here. I should also, I'm now calling it the YC Fiat Fund, but this was leftover money from the very first and only paid project we did in 2020, which was the Neurofuturama project for a client. And that had, we allocated 10% of the earnings from that project to the YC fund. And of that, $1,212 are still left. So this is our dollar fund. We have $1,212. And on Gnosis, I think I put in like a nominal amount of Ether. So we have a little bit to get us started, but basically nothing is started. But the plan is anything we do in the future that has any potential of earning Ethereum or any other currency, a percentage would be like tithing. So maybe somewhere between 10 to 30% would automatically go through split contracts into the YC treasury. And then that becomes available to pay for infrastructure, pay people a little bit for volunteer effort that help all projects. But the main bulk of any earnings would, of course, go to the people working on the specific project that earned it. So this was one of the first setup things we did. So we have a treasury right now. So we at least have, we have a Gnosis safe, and we haven't yet actually used it. We haven't ever done a multi-sig transaction to authorize payment for anything. We'll probably do it when we mint the the online governance paper. When we mint it as an NFT, whoever gets authorized to like pay the gas to mint it will basically get reimbursed from the treasury. So it'll be the first time we actually use the workflow. But that's the first actual thing we've done. We've collected a bunch of resources. Wait, this is not it. We had a page where we did a whole brainstorm. Let's see where it was. I think it's this one. So one of our earliest meetings, we just did a distributed discovery Google search festival, basically, where it was like, we identified a bunch of topics that we know we don't know about. So our known unknowns. And people went off and like explored various topics. So this is kind of a good representation of how the Yak Collective gets going in a distributed, anarchic, sort of messy way. This is muddling through. This is what muddling through looks like. So we have like, I think maybe a dozen people showed up for the first couple of blockchain calls with extremely varied levels of like both knowledge and capacity to acquire knowledge. So for example, I know a fair amount. I'm probably one of the most informed people on blockchain technologies, but my actual capacity to learn is very low because I'm not a software guy. I can't actually program anything. So I'm starting with a very low ceiling on how far I can get based on my capacity to learn. But because I've already done like several weeks of experimentation and I've been a crypto investor for a while, I know more than most people. But for example, Nathan, who's just getting into it, has a lot more technical chops to explore stuff, and he's already done a lot of exploration of like IPFS and RV, which are like distributed file system things in Web3. And in one of our future meetings, I think he's scheduled for December 26th, the day after Christmas, so the Monday after Christmas, he will be doing a deep dive for us, talking about this and how it might fit into the web infrastructure that he's already building. So we have Web 2 infrastructure. How do we take our website and add Web3 type backend stuff to it? And one piece of it might be IPFS or RV. So Nathan will talk about that. And this is how things are going to evolve. Another example that I've been involved in is a couple of years ago, I did a little bit of consulting for Colony, which is a Web3 startup that's building infrastructure to build DAOs. And they are actually doing their token sale today. And I'll be getting some tokens because I advised them for a while, but we might, for example, explore Colony as a way of organizing our own DAO experiments. It may or may not be the technology platform we use, but that's on our discovery map as something to do more research into. And at one point, one of us will do a deep dive into it and we'll take a collective decision on, is Colony going to be the platform we're going to build on? So you can go through this home page and look at the various topics we think we should probably know about. Like, for example, there's a culture war going on between the Bitcoin and Ethereum crowds. One of us should probably dive into sort of the messiness of that and come back and report back to us and talk to the group about it. And then we'll decide, all right, how do we manage our own roadmap in a way that's kind of agnostic to the culture war and not influenced by it. And, we don't want this to become like a battlefield for it, which can happen very easily. Like you get a couple of Bitcoin maximalists and a couple of Ethereum maximalists in our weekly chats, and they're arguing all the time, and suddenly the whole thing falls apart. So, and then of course, we've got a bunch of things. We've got our own reading list. So this is a very complementary activity to the online governance chats that happen on Friday mornings. So there we focus more on the abstract conceptual side of governance. Here we are trying to like get more of a handle on the practical implementation side. So we are trying to collect a bunch of readings that we probably end up reading on occasion here. So people on the Friday calls will discuss concepts. People on the Monday calls might discuss implementation. We'll figure out some partitioning of scopes. So this is our current messy discovery map. And this is where I wanted to like start the discussion, because this is actually an accurate state of where we are and what we know. It's disorganized and messy, but it's there. I should, let's see what else. Okay. We tend to be a very much opposite of not invented here. So you may have heard the phrase not invented here, which is a corporate term for like companies that refuse to borrow innovations from other companies. And I think we have the opposite bias, which is anytime we find something elsewhere that's useful as fodder for our own efforts, we just steal it shamelessly. So Rafa, who's one of the key people on the Mirror DAO, and he's been part of the Yak Collective too, but as a peripheral member, he's getting more active now. He came up with this scheme and his sort of framework for how to think about DAOs and blockchain applied to governance. And he came up with this framework, which we just kind of stole, of these are the things you should be thinking about: mission, ethics, lexicon, lore, rhythms, and networks. And we're just using this as a scaffolding to guide our own discussion. So in future meetings, we might knock these topics off one by one. So we might spend a session talking about what is our mission and how does that fit the blockchain-based medium, right? So this is going to be on the agenda for the next few weeks. So this is very early stage, early days yet. We've only had like 3 meetings. We've done some discovery. We've laid out a little bit of a potential scaffolding that we might use. Another thing we've done is, as with any other activity or discussion track, we like to rotate and like basically have different people study or learn about or do different things and come back and report and lead discussions. So one of the things we hope to do, and this may or may not work, is if somebody goes off and explores a topic, like Nathan has gone off and explored distributed storage, when they come back and give us all a 101 tutorial on what that thing is, we also expect them to propose experiments. So for example, Nathan might come back and say, hey, the 2 big options are IPFS and RV. and we should try using one of them for our website as a first experiment. So that might be one way to proceed. Mirror is another example, because we have the token and we started that publication. We said, hey, one of our experiments is going to be publishing the governance 6-pager as an NFT on Mirror and see how that goes. It may or may not be the platform we kind of like double down on and do more with. Rovers, somebody at some point will propose an experiment on how to do, blockchain on IoT technologies and, put a wallet on the rover so that they can trade tokens or something. Definitely won't be me. It's way above my software competence, but one of the software strong people will probably get on this. So that's where we are. And if you're interested in, how do I put it? If your primary interest is in doing creative projects like, rover, speculative fiction or something like that, and a secondary interest for you is how do you use blockchain to enable that, make it better, make it more powerful, then this activity track will be a perfect fit for you. Show up on Monday meetings, join us, help us explore, learn, try experiments, and so forth. But if, on the other hand, your primary interest is in blockchain technologies and it's like a hammer looking for a nail, you're welcome to participate, but we do want to be like a little wary of like not having the whole Yak Collective agenda hijacked by yet another, I don't know, super frothy blockchain thing, where it's like flooded with people who are like excited about blockchain, excited to make money in blockchain, and just blockchain, blockchain, blockchain for everything. We don't want that to sort of derail the main things we are about. So our main goal, I think, is blockchain is, if we succeed in adopting it, if we succeed in building infrastructure that turns us into a DAO, it's future infrastructure. And at that point, it won't be managed as a project or an active discussion track. It'll become more like an infrastructure activity like Nathan, Jenna, and Meyer and Anuraj do on Wednesdays and Fridays. It'll become more of a background support capability that supports all projects. But right now, because we know so little and everything is so experimental, it has to be a little bit more of a foreground project. So this track of activity right now is somewhere between a discussion group like the online governance chat and an active project. It's not an active project because it's still experimenting and exploring, and it could become an active project. But if that project takes off and succeeds, the end goal will be something that looks like infrastructure that supports all projects. So that's kind of the outlook here. And if we walk the roadmap we've kind of started to lay out and iteratively walk on, that's where we'll end up. So go to this Rome page and check it out. Join us Monday mornings at 8 a.m. Western, Pacific, and noon UTC. And just, merge into this stream of activity and contribute what you can, and we'll sort of roll with it. So that's all I had to say. So I'm going to stop sharing, and comments, questions, discussions.
I wanted to jump in. We've mentioned meeting times a whole bunch. We do have a Google Calendar with all of the meeting times. And if you go to the Events This Week channel, there's a link at the bottom that you can display that Google Calendar and subscribe to it in your own Google Calendar. And that way you can get the events in your own time zone and you don't have to rely on us trying to remember what our offsets are.
I have a question for people here. I see, I would say roughly 30% faces and names I recognize and 70% people I don't. Does anybody have a lot of experience with blockchain stuff that you would like to chime in and share and throw into our hopper of things to think about? Huh, interesting. So there aren't experienced people. One of the reasons I think we put the session at the end is we wanted to almost put a proof of work burden of you actually have to last the first couple of hours of the meeting to get to the blockchain session. So all the super excited people probably dropped out.
Venkatesh, we have a few people who raised their hands.
I can't.
Um,
And let me see. Oh, they were in the first screen. Sorry. All right. Jeremy Rickner. Oh.
Yeah. Hi. Hi, everyone. I've been listening along. I joined the Yak Discord, quite in the beginning. I wasn't quite active, but I'm still in Discord, and I've been following your tweets, Venkat. So most of the updates I received through Twitter, and I've been following along. And as you have been talking more on Twitter and going deeper into the blockchain, so it's something I've been active in and around for a few years. As someone that always like to early adopt technologies, so I used to mine some coins in the beginning. I played around a little bit with mining Bitcoins. I missed by a few months like the good time where you could really mine a Bitcoin in a few hours, but I did keep some for forever as a treasury, like you said. And about 3-4 years ago, I actually worked on some projects as a part of a consulting company that was helping ICOs when there was all the hype about ICOs. So my professional background, my activity is basically consulting and mentoring startups and accelerators where I'm based here in Israel around everything around digital marketing. So I helped some ICOs projects with setting up their digital marketing strategy back when there was the ICO hype. And I've been following also around, the NFT community recently, also helping some people getting into this space and, being in touch with some communities, some minting. So I've heard what you have presented so far. I'll definitely have a look at the Rome page about this project, and I will try also to join whenever I can with the time, difference considerations, the weekly meetings, and try to contribute as much as I can from my own experience with great pleasure.
Right. Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, looking forward to having you join our calls. I see Vinay has his hand up. Hey, Vinay.
Hey, guys. Yeah, so wanted to, I noticed some of the community participation points on the page that you mentioned Rafa has contributed recently. So my interest and or somewhat of like recently acquired knowledge has been into that segment, and especially around being able to use some of the open source tools to measure community participation, and maybe then we can utilize that to have like experiments to instigate new activity that is better defined and hopefully better incentivized too. And incentivize is not just about coins. It can be about a lot of other things, including social recognition and sense of belonging and things like that. But yeah, that's the segment I've been mostly digging into, and would like to share thoughts in that space, and some other tools like SourceGrid or Coordinate and other similar tools that some of them could probably fit the vibe here, the agenda here, or what we are trying to go towards.
I think Venkat, you're muted.
Yeah. Thanks, Vinay, and looking forward to seeing you on board as well, sharing what you've learned. Anybody else got any thoughts? Let me see if any hands are up also.
Random
Right.
tiny thing I don't see added to the blockchain implementation research. This seems like a perfect example of something itself that just the research itself could be repackaged in a million different ways too for outputs. But but just a tiny small things I don't have like right access, I think, yet is under the Bitcoin Ethereum culture war, the flippening. I don't see a bullet point on the flippening. somebody could just pop that in there, append that.
No. You should, it's a public room, so anybody should be able to edit. So
okay.
Yeah, you should be able to just go if you find the link. Somebody will post a link in the Discord. But yeah, so that's pretty much it in terms of outlook. I suspect what will happen through 2022 is for the first few months, we'll just be exploring and learning. Then probably we'll try a couple of more ambitious experiments, like, maybe issue a governance token or maybe adopt some DAO stack tooling or something like that. We will be running into issues like if we publish NFTs, how do you split revenues? We've already had a discussion on like sharing revenues from things that generate income. So yeah, those are the things we'll be running into. And yeah, end of the year, we may be a DAO, we may not be a DAO, we may be something new altogether that we invent, who knows? So yeah, if you're interested, again, Monday mornings. So yeah, that's it for the blockchain roadmap discussion. Back to you, Sachin.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into, and we already have a couple of minutes left, but sort of a good segue into, yeah, I guess we'd like to hear if anybody attending has any interesting sort of projects that they are working on or want to work on in the long term. I think in the agenda we called it project pitches, but it doesn't have to be a pitch. I guess we'd like to learn, yeah, what you're interested in and what you'd like to work on. Does anybody want to?
I mean, I'm going to speak up and say I'm happy to hear that there's a blockchain group that is not full of blockchain maximalists. I've kind of had Venkat's distaste for entering further into the realm due to the amount of noise. So I'm looking forward to checking out Mondays.
Cool. Thanks, Nathaniel. Jeremy, see that you have your hand up.
I didn't lower the hand. I have nothing further to add right now. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
I would say, I mentioned the fitness stuff earlier. I think there's still a lot of like cool stuff, and I don't know that there's a project, but like anybody that's on the call that's interested in fitness in general, if you're a quantified self type person, anything along those lines, like we can start ramping that back up if anybody's interested. I don't know that anybody that's been involved has bandwidth, but I would be happy to prod and poke at ideas and support in any way I can.
Yeah.
I want to interject quick sort of procedural note. The way projects used to kick off like early days of Yak Collective is we had a fairly formal like proposal process with a form and like put a proposal on the Rome page, and like, it almost looked like a DARPA grants type process. And that kind of fell apart as way too heavyweight. And currently the way projects actually kick off is you just start discussion somewhere in the Discord, like, the co-working cafe channel or the general discussion channel. And if a couple of people get interested in the discussion, the next stage is you propose to create a dedicated channel for it, and then a channel gets created in the incubator section. And there, if there's enough activity for a few weeks, we promote that out of the incubator to one of the regular sections of the Discord. And then as discussion builds up, if it continues to have momentum, at that point, it's up to the participants to actually spin up a formal project, as in like, schedule a weekly meeting, put up a document, start getting some structure and goals and stuff. So that's kind of how doing projects on Yak Collective works right now. I don't think we have this documented anywhere, right? We should.
There's a channel lifecycle document in Rome, though it probably needs to be updated a little bit because it uses the wrong channel names, but that talks a little bit about that. I'll put it on my list of things to update.
Matt, see that you have a hand up.
Yeah, everyone, nice to see you and hear the rest of you. There's something I dropped it in one of the threads in the chat in the Discord server, was around this bridge between, I think, personal knowledge management. How do we actually digest and make meaning at the individual level, and then how does that percolate up in terms of kind of like the collective intelligence of a group? And I think that there's like, this is a really rich space, the Yak Collective, of like being a demonstration space of that. And so I'm interested in that as a potential topic, and pursuing that. So I will put that in one of the chat streams and see if there's some critical mass around that. I don't know. It seems like a topic that, I don't know if this has already been covered in some detail, but yeah. So I'll carry it on there.
Yeah, I don't think there's I've not seen a similar topic pop up. I think Mayor had a discussion on workbenches for your mind on the co-working cafe channel that I remember. So, but apart from that, I don't remember any discussions around something like that. So I think that would be useful. And yeah, you can post on co-working cafe channel or general discussion channel to sort of get things started. Anybody else? All right, yeah. I don't have anything much else to add. Does anybody else want to add anything? All right, yeah, so I think we have shared, I've shared the room. You have access to the Discord. Anybody who joined the Discord today from the link on the Zoom, if you can join from the Yak Collective website as well, that'll be useful. Looking forward to having conversations in the general or like co-working channels, check out the project channels, Yak Rover, Astonishing Projects, Infrastructure, Blockchain Governance. Looking forward to seeing more of you there. All right, okay, if nobody else has anything, thanks for joining, and yeah, see you all around.
Happy yakking, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
There you go.
See everybody on Discord.
Mm.